A fiery three-eyed monster, resembling a dog, fiercely and threateningly growled at the traveling guild light of glory, boldly standing nearby in his very presence. There is nothing more pleasant than to start today's story with the guild leader, a man named Claude with long dark hair, who urged his comrades to attack the creature. But as soon as the creature moved, it unleashed a fiery breath that could have turned them to dust except for the large man named Bobson, who stepped forward and blocked its path with his battle axe. The flames suddenly disappeared and Bobson was proud of his actions. He claimed the fire was not hot enough until he felt the bottom of his pants burning, but the flame quickly went out as a puddle of water appeared near the burn, all thanks to the group's priest, Stanley, a fragile man with glasses named Carl. The flames suddenly disappeared and Bobson was proud of his actions. He claimed the fire was not hot enough until he felt the bottom of his pants burning, but the flame quickly went out as a puddle of water appeared near the burn, all thanks to the group's priest, Stanley, a fragile man with glasses named Carl. Then a sharp ice bullet grew from the air and pierced the mouth and body of the fiery creature, pinning it to the spot, taking advantage of this opportunity. Claude activated his skills and enhanced his black sword fencing as he soared into the air. Pushing off the creature's body, he cast a spell and, upon landing, decapitated it with a single strike. He commented that even a magical creature could not compare to him. He sheathed his sword again as soon as he finished. From around the corner came a voice saying Claude had beaten him, but Leonard, the leader of a separate guild, did not need to look back to know who was speaking to him. Claude criticized, saying that he was too slow, and Leonard could only awkwardly smile and scratch the back of his head. He tried to tell others that his comment was a bit harsh while Leonard laughed at Claude's remark. The members of his guild did not feel better. They were not pleased to see Claude looking so intently at the dark-haired man. And when Claude said the same to their leader, the anger did not lessen. First of all, I wouldn't be surprised if we lose to you even in the guild rankings. Almost one of Leonard's comrades raised his voice while explaining to others that today's task was a joint mission between their guilds. But the leader tried to calm him down. At least the monster was defeated without any problems. Turning away from them, Claude left without saying that they should be grateful. There were no dead nearby, and he himself grabbed the dark-haired man and the boy by the edge of the shirt. He is the main hero of our story, Fildo Electria. As soon as Claude and Fildo left, other colleagues of Leonard appeared. They were struck that among the participants there were not just children, real members, illuminated by the party light of glory. They wondered if they had been holding something back all this time. Leonard confirmed that he was the leader of the group, and that from the very beginning he did not expect such behavior from Fildo. They saw how Fildo sat behind a stone while his comrades fought, but Leonard said nothing more. In the tavern sat members of the party light of glory. They drank to the further growth of their guild, which was led by the magical swordsmen Claude and Bobson. He also commented on how their guild managed to grow so much, while Carl added that everyone's level had already reached its peak. He asked Dorothy if she agreed with this as well. Dorothy confirmed and wondered if other guilds could compete with them anywhere at all, while she enjoyed her drink and slammed it on the table. When Claude joined the conversation, he realized their light of glory was the strongest, and it was not just about level and size. He noted that Fildo might have missed today's celebration, but as soon as they realized this, one of them pointed at him. It was he who sent their points to the giver so that he would carry out his tasks. Claude addressed Fildo, who was carrying out an assignment for the guild. He was hurrying down the street, checking the list, when suddenly a man was almost knocked down by the box he was carrying. Fildo managed just in time and saved him. With anxiety in his eyes, he asked the man if he was okay. But the man could only thank Fildo before realizing he was being chased. Fildo dashed away when the older man mocked him and immediately realized he needed to become better. When he reached the tavern, his friends mocked him for being late and teased him with jokes about his low abilities. Short distances are a trifle for some, but they still consider this work to be too hard for them. They were silent while their interlocutor was attacked with insults about the subject of the conversation, and they themselves kept their heads down. Suddenly, Claude grabs him and pulls him closer, then asks if Fildo is upset, trying to cheer him up with words that his expertise helps Claude so much. Claude insists Fildo shouldn't think too deeply about it. Fildo thinks they should get to work, not get offended by sarcasm and drink all day. Suddenly, Dorothy leans to his ear and whispers that he was supposed to do the job to deliver monster materials there, reminding him that they let it slip away. Fildo turns his head, frowning. He barely says anything but restrains himself. The guild leaders tried to stop him, although they didn't even say they would at least give him a glass of water. But Fildo already warned them that he would return, and Dorothy snorted disdainfully, seeing how coldly the boy treated her. Just as Fildo was about to leave the room, Claude called him and, before Fildo could take it, handed him a small piece of paper. Then the guild leader began to explain that Fildo's financial performance this quarter was unsatisfactory. They made many cuts, and although Fildo did not ask, Dorothy commented on how convenient it was for them to give him points in their guild. He thanked Fildo because thanks to their presence the experience grew more than twice. Even the witch admitted that the Glow of Glory had turned into the #1 guild in the country, but Carl and Bobson doubted their abilities. Fildo finally returned to his room and felt tired. He looked at the contents of his payslip and decided to analyze the statistics from their previous quests, noticing how their salaries were cut. Bob's strength as a soldier was tested, and he found out all that was left was trivial. Looking back at all this, he realized, for several years he had been basking in the rays of glory, but his level had not grown. They definitely knew how to squeeze every ounce of value from Fildo, but he, like the guild, understood. He had no other special abilities except the ability to distribute and enhance the experience of those who participate. Usually, Fildo was kept in the rear, and the guild placed more experienced fighters in front. If everything depended on him, Fildo thought he did not need a level, but suddenly a memory surfaced. Claude asked him to join their guild. Then the guild leader swore to become the biggest and strongest guild in the world. These words echoed in his head. Fildo thought that even he could no longer stand next to them, but if he was lucky, the guild would smash him to pieces even earlier. The next day, Fildo could only stand still when he heard Claude say that he was no longer needed. He shuddered when the guildmaster repeated it, and without any reproaches, Claude said that he was no longer needed. With his mouth wide open, Fildo could only stand and listen as Claude emphasized. He was fired, temporarily suspended, and thanked the former member for everything he had done. But Fildo tried to object, saying that he himself knew his level was low, but he still believed at least part of the contribution he gave to the guild was his ability to share experience. This time Dorothy responded. She stood right in front of Fildo and bowed, saying that now they no longer needed that experience. Bobson also joined in and declared that with their strength and capabilities no one else could compete with them, and Fildo was just a burden. They arranged a queue of mockery for him, saying that all guild members were already at high levels, and since Fildo was at a lower one, he only hindered the team. Even when they said he had no adventure skills at all, they finished him off with words. His magic and sword level were the same as an average ordinary person. They asked him what he would do after leaving here, and some other voice laughed and said, the only reason he had such a low level was that their permissions did not allow him to fight. Claude and their guild leader stated that the guild members agreed to push him out and forcibly expel him, and Fildo could only silently stand, bowing his head, with a quiet voice. Fildo asked if this was really okay with them, and this caught Claude's attention even before he added new barbs. The former plant snitch asked them very loudly if they were really sure they wanted him to leave. He narrowed his eyes when he said this. Pause hung in the air until Bobson, Carl, and Dorothy burst out laughing. The older man bowed as he told Fildo that they had long since made their indifference to him clear, but instead of talking to him, Fildo approached Claude's table and now stood face to face with the president of the fellowship. Fildo asked again if they wanted him to leave, reminding them that if he took all the knowledge gained from his experience, it would affect them. But Claude was not swayed by this, and the older man looked irritated. He repeated that they were not a social club and that they did not like those who were not useful to them. Even despite his own disappointment, Fildo tried to explain that his departure would hurt not only the four of them but the entire guild. Claude finally broke free and pushed Fildo, delivering a strong blow to the door outward. A hand roughly landed on Fildo's back while Claude mockingly called him lowly adventurer. Three more stood in the doorway, and Dorothy was scolding Fildo not to count on weekend help, while Claudicidno threw a broadsword at Fildo for being no longer useful. But despite everything, they moved on. When the door slammed in Fildo's face, one of the friends laughed at him because he told the truth, and even jokingly. He was left out in the cold of a snowy night. Fildo drew his broadaxe and activated the skill before destroying the ability he shared with the guild, and everything around cracked. Fidlo told Claude that this would be their last meeting, and he would remain true to his word. He returned to them the experience he borrowed without looking back. Fildo moved toward the Dark Knight, sword clenched in his hand, as soon as he heard the squeak that which announced the level had risen. The next scene showed that they were in a pub, and an old man with a vertical scar on his right eye was tenderly recalling how perfect the dragon meat was. Suddenly he turns into a food critic and explains that the meat is not only thick and hearty but also juicy, and the younger Fildo almost drools just from his description. Some cut the old man off mid-sentence, others have long been bored by this tale, but Fildo remains interested. Even Claude, the younger one, notices how focused he is. Claude also tells him if he ever becomes a traveler he might have a chance to taste dragon meat, so for now he must try hard. Later Fildo woke up from sleep and realized he had dreamed a memory from the past. Yawning, he still heard those continuous beep signals. The boy even said that in his own country neither the commander of the Integrity Knight nor anyone else had anything close to that. It was hard for him to believe that the amount of experience he had distributed to all guild members turned out to be so large after he looked at his stat data. Fildo thought, if only he had that much. Then maybe he could try all the things he had refused because of his own weaknesses, as if a quest voice announced that he continues to level up. But back to the topic. Fildo thought that now, perhaps, he would join the Knight Order and raise his rank, and on the other hand it might be a good idea. Suddenly a burly man with a scar on his face appeared behind and burst into loud laughter as soon as he heard what Fildo said. Coming to his senses, he looked at Fildo and admitted that he had been a guild member for quite a long time. He also agreed that dealing with dragons was not easy, so he doubted that a newcomer like Fildo could face a monster like that suddenly. His tone immediately changed. He asked Fildo if he really wanted to test his strength, and the receptionist immediately became worried and was ready to say that fighting in the guild was forbidden. But our point giver was not confused and cold-bloodedly told the older man that he should not do that. I did not mean it that way. When suddenly the latter bent down to his level and said that he would break Fildo's nose before the dragon could do it while testing the younger one's ability. The strong man suddenly jumped up and tried to hit Fildo, but the younger Fildo managed to dodge in time. Other travelers shouted with excitement as the fight heated up. One even tried to lighten the mood and advised the strong man to treat the boy more gently. The receptionist asked if he would continue to test newcomers like that, considering it had already happened so many times. The man just snorted and told the receptionist not to interrupt their fight, and then attack Fildo again with continuous blows, mocking his ability to dodge attacks. When Fildo saw his chance, he fired a blow with such force that the strong man fell to the floor, leaving everyone in shock. The room exploded with chatter. Everyone wondered if they had just witnessed a fight from the David and Goliath series. The strong man still cannot comprehend what happened, and Fildo asks if he is okay. Yes, it is the same boy. And the most striking thing was that he was the one who apologized and admitted he was brought here because he did not expect it. The old woman looked at him and asked what Fildo had not realized. And when the administrator saw the stares, she could not believe that someone like him could so easily tear apart some veteran researcher. She even wondered who Fildo really was. Suddenly his thoughts sharply returned to him and surprised her even before the child appeared. He bows and apologizes for causing trouble. He then asks further about dragons, and by telling her what she already knows, he calms the receptionist. He informed Fildo that after they left the royal city, there's a straight road leading north from there which they can take. Rumors circulated that dragons appear in the mountainous area of the Nautilus region. There were many of them there, especially on the road that is extremely important. It was the very road used by Fildo's merchants, who could only previously visit the mountains in the Nautilus region. He ran across, smiling. He knew where that dragon was sitting. He barely had time to thank the receptionist. She got scared as soon as she saw him leaving alone. She tried to call him back, warning that going alone was dangerous and that they usually gathered a squad for quests like this. Unfortunately, Fildo was one of Speedy's children, so he had already slipped out the door before he could figure out what he was saying. Instantly, the phone at the reception rang and the receptionist quickly took it, listening to the person on the other end of the line. After hearing their side, she reported that Fildo had just set off to the mountainous area within the territory of Nautilus and confirmed that he had already started the dragon quest. He heard the other side speaking and was surprised. Fildo seemed to be connected with the light of fame. Eventually, realizing what had happened earlier, even before he finished the call, he also reported that Fildo left on his own, although he is very strong. Instead, the point of provision was enjoying its first independent adventure, and impatiently was eager to taste the dragon's meat. Bobson turned to the light of the Glory headquarters. He leaned against the wall and intently watched the sword duel happening right in front of him. Suddenly, Carl, a younger guy, appeared nearby and asked how things were going. It turned out Carl was a rookie adventurer. According to Carl, their alliance was working great, and Bobson strongly agreed, smiling. He told the younger one that the woman there was the real deal. From behind, before his pistol touched her, she threw her book up. She exhaled and sharply grabbed his pistol. A few hairs from his neck caught him by surprise, but he still managed to dodge at the last moment. When she made a lunge, he anticipated the next move, struck his hand, right next to her opening. She counted her strikes before directing the sword straight into his chest. She managed to knock his wooden sword out of his hand while hovering over him. Checkmate was already decided for him, but she, being kind, informed him of his own flaws, showed that he used 4 of her gaps, 5 if you count the first, and then yielded when he ran away. Claude confidently strode towards his opponent, boasting of his own abilities, and even claimed that he could kill him if he took everything seriously. The guild leader started with a smile, then began flattering and expressed surprise when Ed received the title Sword Saint. His speech was accompanied by applause, but the moon on the other side looked displeased, yet still thanked Claude for his words. Although their conversation was only friendly, the words sounded good. Dorothy watched these two, biting her nails and feeling everything boiling inside. He asked Claude why he was flirting so much with the holy sword just because the sword turned out to be a bit skillful for the irritated sorcerer. It was scary to see how Dorothy's mood suddenly snapped into sudden rage. She suddenly laughed, explaining to Carl that beautiful women are often unkind to other beautiful women except to themselves, because they are jealous. The pastor asked who said these words. Dorothy proudly admitted that these were her words even before they managed to continue the conversation. But the conversation breaks off when they see Claude returning to them. The witch was the first to approach him, and immediately declared how incredibly much she liked talking with the holy sword. Yet Claude interrupted her and said that the situation was bad. He leaned forward, then quietly whispered to the witch that Lunasa suspects Fildo's disappearance. Claude says that while trying to dissuade her, he kept saying, supposedly the donor took some time off. He recalled how Lunasi said during the trip that she wanted to see him soon, a person who could share the experience of a guild leader. He did not expect that the only reason he agreed to join their guild was that he was looking for Fildo. But under these circumstances, he already knew his excuse would not work. A little later, Dorothy began to panic, asking what they could do, but even Claude admitted, at first, nothing can be done. She held a piece of Fildo, which was supposed to lead the holy swordsman to the meeting, and this made her think of doing something different. Dorothy refused, almost throwing a tantrum when asked why she should clean up problems for some nobody. Meanwhile, Carl and Bobson talked casually. Bobson admitted that he decided not to challenge the holy swordsman, although his hands were trembling and this aroused suspicion in the priest. Without taking his eyes off his hands, Bobson told him that he had a bad feeling, although he could not properly explain it. The body seemed to be missing something and the equipment was becoming even heavier. Suddenly Carl cut him off and answered an important call. They were stunned by the information voiced by the priest and they immediately summoned Claude and Dorothy. Carl told them that Fildov seems to be heading north to the mountains and will probably try to complete the quest alone. Reading the news, Claude muttered to himself that going north alone is reckless. But suddenly a thought clicked in his mind and Claude began laughing uncontrollably, leaving Carl in complete confusion. It was then that Claude recounted the story of why Fildo was no longer part of their guild. So this will happen, he thought. During the vacation, the light from Glor's Fildo Point was misunderstood by him, as if with the growth of the guild he would become stronger. He hastily agreed to conquer his quest alone, but unfortunately he was attacked by bandits and died on the battlefield, laughing to himself. Claude was even sure the story he created was so convincing that it could be shown to everyone as the best script. Dorothy started laughing while buying his tale, and Claude told her that this was their chance. People usually do not try to handle such requests on their own. Now that the story was set, Claude wondered how they would get rid of Fildo, but Dorothy reminded him they are the light of glory, the best guild one could have. Dorothy agreed to join and said she would come as soon as she added they needed to be careful. Carl noted that with their appearance in Fildo, there was no chance of survival anymore. Since Claude was a magical swordsman of almighty glory, and Dorothy was a powerful witch with strong magical abilities. Probably the priest thought that Fildo would die. Without wasting more time, Claude ordered to gather people who could do the rough work, because they had to go to the mountains to clean up the trash. Meanwhile, Claude gathered his people to observe them from the inside. The one who had previously sworn to kill Fildo was scared by talks about Fildo, and our local champion of point transfer happily climbed up the mountain, having no idea how exactly he would eat dragon meat as soup or a steak burger. On the other side of the mountain, the commotion only grew. The road was blocked, paralyzing the merchants and their cargo, leaving travelers immobile. All carriages for trips were stuck due to the blockade. Mr. Gonzalez, a stout merchant, stood aside and assessed the situation. He complained that several minutes had passed since the people ahead moved forward, when suddenly another merchant appeared and ordered them to retreat because the road had become impassable. Gonzalez inquired if this meant they were ordered to get to the other side of the valley, and at that moment his hand was informed. The dragon finally came out onto the road, having heard that the dragon had caused trouble. The thick merchant's eyebrows furrowed. He became distressed because for him this was the worst situation. He had a large amount of goods, and other merchants said that if they were not allowed through this way, they would have to take a longer route and be ready to increase travel time by 3 to 4 days. Mr. Gonzalez insisted. The route they were taking now was the most efficient to reach the mountains because there were no other options. The merchants were preparing to go around on horses in caravans, some already thinking they would have to leave part of the goods behind. But the biggest trouble was that dragons attacked precisely in these parts. And in that area, things dragged on for some time until another merchant announced to everyone that he had appealed to the guild for help. Only Fildo was jumping back and forth, smiling. One of the merchants tried to stop him and warned the fortune teller that a dragon would arrive ahead. Fildo began to attract attention until Mr. Gonzalez asked the older man if he was a novice adventurer. The merchant also said that the guild would send a team for the capture. If he bypasses this path, it is better to do so for now. Fildo replied that he was the adventurer who received the capture request. There was a pause. Only the prickly hustle of a tumbleweed in the desert was missing here. Mr. Gonzalez quietly patted Fildo on the shoulder and said that although he was eager for a new adventure, acting with a hot head was not worth it. Dragons are incredibly complex and frightening. Fildo tried to prove that he was a real pro, but Mr. Gonzalez explained, dragons require experienced travelers to defeat them. Mr. Gonzalez suddenly sat down, noticing a protrusion crest on his sword, and was immediately filled with reverence. He asked if it belonged to a respected guild, which Fildo could neither confirm nor deny. But in his thoughts he answered Fildo. He himself was once a member of the guild. The merchant decided that he was probably capable of this and began to apologize to Fildo for his doubts. Apparently he offended the young man with his view that he looked too young, but Fildo accepted the apology without any delay. He knew Mr. Gonzalez did it only out of concern for the matter. Moreover, the merchant explained that they were transporting important cargo food, medicine, and clothing, which would have a significant impact on the people they were sending it to. That is why killing the dragon was just as important to them. Mr. Gonzalez bowed his head and asked Fildo for help, and the young man agreed. Mr. Gonzalez informed them that he had gone to where the dragon was. Fildo did not waste time. He immediately went out against the dragon. As soon as he successfully did so, he immediately analyzed the creature by its characteristics. The red dragon was of a high level. Holding the sword in his hand, the monster looked straight into the eyes of the mighty creature. It looked him over indifferently from top to bottom and finally turned its back to Fildo. The creature responded unexpectedly, causing Fildo to ask the dragon why it suddenly turned around as soon as it saw something quickly approaching from its anxious surroundings. The dragon's tail flashed across the ground, leaving a trail of destruction behind. But the voice of our young boy was heard. He sincerely said that the dragon was impressive and was surprised to see Fildo appear whole and unharmed, despite the fact that his back was covered with splinters when the dragon let out a terrible roar. Fildo focused this time because he finally realized how strong that squeezing was. His fingers went numb. The wonder was shaking so much that he felt it to the bone. The red dragon did not waste a moment. It unleashed its fiery breath on Fildo. But the traveler immediately slipped behind the creature and shocked it with an action it had never done before. The red dragon swung its tail to hit him, but Fildo shouted that he had seen that before. The red dragon arched backward to dodge its own tail, then retreated, and before the strike sank its mighty claws into Fildo. But Fildo was already gone. Then the dragon started searching for him and at the same time swayed to the side. Finally, it dawned on him. The traveler jumped into the air and landed a punch on the neck. Although Fildo managed to decapitate the dragon, it was unharmed. Its extremely hard scales saved it. And yet Fildo was incredibly happy and hopped back and forth with difficulty. He believed he had managed and killed the dragon all by himself, but for him, the main thing was not victory but the meat he craved. Finally, Fildo's attention fell on the boots. He felt something slippery. It was the dragon's blood, and now when he realized this, Fildo wondered how to wash it off. Despite knowing it was dangerous, the creature was here when he heard a call from behind. He turned his head and saw Claude, Dorothy, and some freaks holding Mr. Gonzalez and other merchants hostage. The guild leader asked Fildo in a threatening tone if he missed him. Fildo could only squeeze out, "Why?" and Dorothy replied that there was no choice because their new recruit, Saint's Sword, was looking for him. They say the witch asked why he just didn't come. They agreed, but Fildo got angry and ordered them not to interfere with him. Claude cut off the conversation and hinted at what they would do next. Moreover, the guild leader stated, if Fildo does not join, monsters might attack and kill the entire group of traders. Despite their persistent hints, Dia persuaded Fildo to fulfill the demands of the one who gives points on their behalf, but Fildo only glanced at them through his teeth. They took Mr. Gonzalez and others hostage. When Dorothy spoke again, she pointed to the thing on the ground behind the toy and confirmed to Claude that it was Red Dragon. She was about to ask if Fildo had killed him, but Claude said that probably someone else had come and dealt with him before he returned to their endpoint. The Federation leader informed Fildo that his adventure was over. He was already about to unleash his devastating technique on the ground. Instead of activating his skill, Claude only furrowed his brows and realized how suddenly heavy his sword had become. Moreover, he could not release magical power from the sword. Even Dorothy was surprised by what she saw before deciding to immediately use her freezing hell skill directly on Fildo. Someone was attacking instead of enjoying the cold wind with him. Dorothy felt a strange shiver in her skin. Her skin trembled, her eyes widened, and her head spun. Could it be that her greatest magical power suddenly stopped working? Her hands trembled as she realized. At her current level, she now only had basic cold magic. Then one of the guild members shouted, asking Claude what happened. Dorothy was boiling. Claude told her something completely different. But before she could hear the guild leader's explanation, Fildo had already defeated them. Dorothy was annoyed by how carelessly Claude behaved. Claude lunged at the young man with his sword, but one kick was enough for him. Fildo tried to break free, and as he got up, he still felt the ground beneath his feet. He approached his former guild leader and warned him not to get involved with the Point Distributor again, and he added that he would do the same and forget about them. This made Claude even angrier. Dorothy even used her magic once more to suddenly stand between them, and they were able to escape. Dorothy released her magical pair and used it as a protective screen. It quickly blurred Fildo's vision, so it proved effective. The fog cleared and only the two of them remained. The guild members she defeated had already rushed to help. The merchant Fildo hurried to them, asked Mr. Gonzalez if he was okay, and he replied that he was fine, just a bit injured after being caught earlier. He thanked Fildo before he could respond, feeling guilty for involving the merchants in trouble. Mr. Gonzalez had already stood up again, and to be honest, his attention was fixed on the dead dragon. This is exactly what he explained to Fildo. Such monsters are usually brought to the city as raw material for manufacturing. The item itself was put up for sale, but it would be inconvenient for the travelers to carry it. So the merchant offered to lend one of his carts, and the travelers agreed, securing this condition for themselves. After that, the smell and sound of frying dragon meat spread. The fire crackled like mad. Mr. Gonzalez tells Fildo that although dragons are a terrible threat, parts of their horns and organs have healing properties. Also, their scales can be used as armor, claws as weapons, and the meat is considered a valuable delicacy. And the merchant emphasizes, among travelers there is even a saying when preparing valuable dragon meat, not a single part of it goes to waste. The old man had no choice but to ask if everything was all right and to ask them, with the help of Fildo, to share with them his extremely valuable catch. That was the last thing he could do. But still, they helped the traveler disassemble the dragon, and he could not eat all that meat by himself. Hearing Fildo say that it was enough for Mr. Gonzalez, he could no longer contain his excitement when he saw the meat in front of him. It was the highest quality meat that could only be found in this region. Fildo took a juicy bite of the shashlik, feeling the fragrant aroma of spices penetrate his nostrils, while the meat was firm and chewy. He enjoyed savoring it more and more. Although the meat was hot, the taste was so rich thanks to the sweet sauce that the sauce splattered as he bit into it. The spicy flavor tickled his tongue, almost like tasting a spicy dragon shashlik. Mr. Gonzalez returned to him with a smile and asked how he was feeling. Fildo imitated the old man's facial expression and said it was the best. The night merchants celebrated. Meanwhile, Claude and Dorothy returned to their guild to discuss the matter from before. The merchant asked Fildo to return to the Guild of Royal Adventurers, which handed over the dragon's tail to the greeter. Meanwhile, all the other adventurers looked at him in surprise. And already in the castle, the king summoned the head of glory and his 3 officials, Claude, Dorothy, and Bobson. As an elder, His Majesty began to explain why he summoned them. He said he wanted to learn about the events that happened yesterday, about the extermination of Red Dragon on Nautilus Street according to reports. When the merchants were there, they complained that Claude and other guild members took them hostage. Although the king added, there is news that the merchants were later released. The king immediately got down to the most important matter and asked Claude if he had an explanation. He solemnly replied that the king's words had greatly disappointed him. His courage knew no equal. His Majesty froze with an expression that was impossible to read, while Claude meanwhile reminded the king again that their guild was famous throughout the country. Although it was unfortunate that there were those who pretended to be someone important, he still remained the most famous in the country. Dorothy was simply amazed by his ability to lie with such an honest expression that she even said, maybe it's because of one of them. The former participant and the king wondered why the guild hadn't done this, since he had already lied when he was traveling. Claude firmly told the king that they were not there and that they had been missing the council for several days. Having heard their side, the king no longer insisted and emphasized that crimes committed in their name were a serious matter. At the same time, His Majesty noted that he knew the guild's capabilities, but many requests had previously failed. A few days later, he declared that as the guild leader, Claude must also increase support and bring skilled members into the guild. And the king added a warning, through overconfidence and negligence one can fall, considering recent events. They must immediately solve this problem by turning off the king's light of glory and inform them of any news so they are prepared. Claude and others bowed their heads and asked the king for help in this matter. His face was etched into anger's memory, and he cursed Fildo. He shuddered when he learned that the older man was actually the owner of the shop where there was everything, from accessories to weapons and medicines. Mr. Gonzalez behaved modestly. He offered Fildo more tea and snacks and said that his shop was not of such a level. But despite this, he was very kind. He even apologized for giving only a snack. But Fildo was still happy because of how Mr. Gonzalez thanked him. Fildo was enjoying the snack when suddenly a man in armor entered the door and approached Fildo very threateningly. Although the man behaved respectfully, Fildo was surprised when he asked about the traveler named Fildo Electria. The food distributor shook crumbs from his face, and Fildo stood up to speak to the man. Suddenly the man apologized for his rudeness and introduced himself. He was the captain of the royal guard, not just an ordinary soldier. He told the young man that he came for him at the king's request. After meeting Fildo, he reported that they had heard. A reward was given to Fildo for whoever kills the dragon first. From this, Fildo began to panic and wanted to refuse everything. But suddenly Mr. Gonzalez's hand covered his mouth and brought his smooth face closer to Fildo. He warned Fildo that refusing the king's gifts was an extremely improper act. Hearing this, Fildo turned to the captain, who gave him a cold smile. Out of fear, the traveler humbly accepted his offer. Soon Fildo found himself in the royal palace, and in the presence of the king, when the captain introduced him to His Majesty. His Majesty watched Fildo intently, and he in response stared back with a barely noticeable shudder. And suddenly the old man smiled with satisfaction. As soon as Fildo met the traveler who had defeated the dragon, he immediately bowed his head in greeting to the king. But the king waved it off, saying that formalities were unnecessary, especially since the younger man was the one who managed to kill the red dragon that roamed the streets. The king admitted that it was difficult for them to protect the logistics of their country from dragons, and called Fildo a hero for enduring it. Although Fildo was grateful, in his thoughts he initially just wanted to eat dragon meat. Frightened, Fildo told the king that he could not accept gold coins, but His Majesty would not let him go home without a reward. He even considered giving Fildo one of his territories and asked if he was interested. When offered to become a lord, Fildo only smiled and waved it off. Suddenly the traveler became serious and told His Majesty that, although he was very grateful for the offer, Fildo believed he would not be able to manage the territory, even if the gift really was given to him. Fildo added to the king that he wanted to explore the world and gain experience beyond its borders. Although sad, the king allowed Fildo to leave and gave him assistance as a gift. Fildo thanked him and met with the captain near the gates after their meeting ended. He was already aware of Fildo's experience and his skills in distribution and dissemination, so he would be glad if he stayed in the country. So he felt ashamed because Fildo decided not to go. Instantly his skin was covered with goosebumps and he realized that the king was actually cunning, although he should aspire to this. The king is the highest authority in this country. Fildo decided to keep these thoughts to himself. Right now, what worries him most is the gift of money he was given. He had never received so much, not only from the Union but also from the entire state apparatus. If he were honest, he could buy everything he needed with this money. But now he cannot think of what exactly he could buy for such an amount. And yet now he is considering it. Fildo is considering the option of buying better equipment because he needs to look like a traveler. In the end, Fildo decided to return for some time to Mr. Gonzalez's place, never guessing that he was standing behind him. Lunasis suddenly swung the holy sword and struck the unconscious Fildo. Only at the last moment did Fildo realize. Lunasis jumped closer and embraced him with a smile. Fildo was not just frozen, she was also blushing. The Sword of the Saints continued to tell how she had known all this time. It was him and how long he had dreamed of meeting her. But all Fildo could say now was that the armor on her chest hurt him so much. Lunasis did not listen. She insisted on how long she had waited together with the guild, but Fildo did not. While he continued to question the guild members, they only replied that the donor was still on vacation. Fildo panicked even more because of the crowd's looks. But eventually, the famous swordsman Iskant let him go, first confirming that this was the same man who had once been a traveler in a great guild from somewhere. They did not know this from the start, but she smiled warmly when he called her name. She confessed that she had always sincerely revered him with her heart. Fildo dismissed his own experience and devoted himself to the guild. Lunasis even revealed where she knew everything about what the Light of Glory had achieved, all thanks to Fildo's efforts, who acted in the shadows. Meanwhile, Fildo tried to pull himself together but saw that he was again drawing attention from the crowd. He called her back and said that she had already left the guild. Approaching impressed, Lunasis immediately asked why Fildo was silent at first before telling him part of the truth. They were stopped by the fact that, according to them, they already had enough experience. They did not need people with useless skills. On Fildo's part, he also told her that he had already given them an honest warning, considering how Claude and others had driven him away. Fildo coldly informed Lunasis that he now worked as a freelance adventurer and had a lot of things he wanted to accomplish. He decided to build a solo career and was no longer affiliated with any guild. Lunasis asked again if he had heard correctly that he no longer belonged to the guild. Fildo answered yes firmly. Without any unnecessary words, Lunasis asked him to form a party with her. Lunasis left the Light of the Glory Guild in anger. Claude was even more enraged because he realized he had already spent a considerable amount just to get inside, and quickly declared that what happened in the palace was wrong. Lunasis calmly objected. It was not so. She said she did not want to join the guild without Fildo. She apologized to the guild master for not informing him earlier. When she turned around, Lunasis also told Claude that she would return the deposit made during the contract signing and left without looking back. Claude tried to call her once more, but in response silence, and this angered him again. What happened to Fildo? I can't believe Claude still doesn't understand. All their achievements are thanks to Fildo. Yes, he couldn't grasp it, especially when Fildo was just a convenient amplifier, and suddenly the door opened. The office came alive again as Carl burst in abruptly. This time, guild members crowded around Claude as he went downstairs and looked at what was happening among his people. A quarrel broke out between two guild members. One of them immediately reminded. He had already said before that by joining the Light of Glory, they would gain power as they wished. It's true, it was somehow different before, but recently even guild participants realized how they failed many recent missions, not to mention that those missions were quite simple. Yet some adventurers still got into trouble. Even if they were extremely skilled, everything was decided by what would happen next. He told the guild leader that he might have to leave, and this caused concern among many members. It was then that several injured guild members appeared and asked Claude if he considered their injuries a joke. One of them added that he had just seen the Sword Saint leave, so he took it as a sign to flee the guild. They are convinced that they will definitely split because of the leader. Claude tries to deny everything, but one of them says that since Fildo left, strange things have started happening. Everyone was sure they were moving forward and recalled how Claude once said, joining the Light of Glory would improve their abilities. They even reminded the guild leader that he himself stated, Fildo would only hold them back. Guild members also noticed that Claude always allows Fildo to join missions with higher difficulty, and wondered what the guy does when he returns to the altar. When the Guild of Royal Travelers Fildo asked about the Elven country, the reception manager responded only with a tense smile and emphasized that she knows the legend. One of the adventurers who overheard the conversation told Fildo how he heard it from his great-grandmother, and the story descended to the goblins of Midway. Fildo tried to ask others and was mocked for believing in such tales. Finally, he decided to go to the library for more information, angry that no one accepted him. Examining the catalog carefully, he realized information about the elves is incredibly hard to find. He even admitted that he only knows about elflings from books he read in childhood. In his opinion, the elves are a mysterious people, and although they never appeared in society, this did not deter him. He stubbornly set off to elf country holding only one book and studying it. He remembered how elf country always appears in ancient stories and fairy tales, so he was convinced there is a related race to them, even if there is almost no information about it. He was so absorbed in his affairs that he did not notice the moon standing nearby until she asked if he was interested in elves. The sudden appearance of the elf startled him just at the moment she was about to close. He gestured to be quiet because they were in the library. They whispered. Fildo asked why she was here. She replied that she wanted to invite him to a party. Fildo reminded her he had already refused her, but the Sword Saint did not care. She asked if it was okay for her to be here and how things were going with her work in the guild. Lunasis responded indifferently that everything had stopped, and Fildo raised his voice in surprise. The librarian glanced at them because they were making noise. Sword Saint said that the only reason she joined the guild was to watch Fildo, then immediately changed the subject and asked about the book he was holding, covering his face with it. Fildo whispered embarrassedly that he was trying to find elf country, but before he could say anything else, she heard from him. He knows it's just a fairy tale. But the feeling of adventure is to find something no one has ever seen, and that Luna does not see. No kidding, it made her even more determined to join, and it made him wary. Maybe she is using the human wave tactic against him. They spoke so casually that they themselves forgot they were in the library. She sincerely objected, then approached Fildo and declared that she knew the way to the elf country. This shocked Fildo, and eventually they were both kicked out of the library. He shook her by the shoulder. She was still amazed and curious, so she asked if the Elven Kingdom really existed. The sparkle of excitement in his eyes, and Luna smiled. But instead of voicing it, Lunasis turned away and laughed at him with a joke, saying she might be able to show the way if they worked together. He could only feel irritation and a bit of anger before finally accepting her offer, but she could not. Before Lunasis invited him to set off for the land of elves, he immediately emphasized, "This is only temporary, only until they reach the destination." For Lunasis, that was enough to feel happy, while Fildo kept insisting that it was all temporary. Without wasting time, he told Lunasis that they must smile as soon as he finally gets what he wants. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Claude couldn't believe what he was hearing. The heart of the guild leader was beating as he asked the captain what his decision meant to indefinitely postpone all actions of eternal glory. By this order, all actions carried out in the name of light of glory are strictly prohibited. After His Majesty heard Claude's previous statement, he became very worried, so the king ordered Claude to arrest those responsible who deceived him. The captain informed the guild leader that the guild would not be able to continue its activities until the issue was resolved. He also emphasized that they must obey His Majesty's words and declared, if any unauthorized activity occurs, the worst will face harsher punishments. Before closing the door, the elder man warned Claude, the guild may be disbanded, but that will not prohibit personal affairs. As soon as the door quickly closed, Claude threw something into it and it later disappeared, while he loudly proclaimed that it was the Light of Glory, the highest guild in the country. Carl and Dorothy tried to calm him down, seeing how deeply distressed he was. But Claude was racking his brain at that moment, wondering how it all happened, even though they had just expelled Fildo and lost the Sword Saint. He was sure they could start again because they still had his friends. But suddenly all the guild members removed him, although he assured them it was only temporary. He firmly told Claude that he would look for another guild. The elder even stated that no adventurer would put themselves in such a dangerous situation, and apologized for leaving so abruptly. Bobson, having lost his composure, grabbed the elder by the collar and threw at him that they had long since let the light of glory slip from their hands. Suddenly a blow struck Bobson's cheek. Shooting him to the other end of the room, he did it just as the elder man turned his back. Saying farewell at the end, Carl quickly went to his friend. He asked the bigger man if he was okay. Suddenly Bobson burst into tears in his eyes, and he loudly said how much it hurt him. He said that he usually endured beatings, but this time no. He sobbed, calling for his mother, while Carl tried to use magic to heal him. Claude silently watched as Carl's magic failed. When he told the leader of their guild that he had no healing magic, the leader turned to him, tears stood in his eyes. He was already broken inside by the fact that his guild was falling apart before his eyes. On the other hand, Fildo was busy with his own adventures. He had just beheaded a fallen wolf enemy and immediately shifted his gaze to two others who were hastily fleeing. As soon as they met his gaze, Fildo no longer chased after them. He was tired of these creatures and wondered if the elven country really existed somewhere in the middle of the forest, because this time he saw nothing resembling a normal path. This made him even more eager to understand how quickly Lunasis found the elven country and spoke about it. The Sword Saint had something to say, from warnings about werewolves to knowledge about a certain source ahead. Fildo thought it was similar to something he had experienced before. He always knew the place, but suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a sound. He heard the jingle of a spring. Suddenly he remembered, his friend had no weapon, so he immediately ran to the swordbearer to warn the battle wolves would come soon. In the spring she was like the moon. She fought the wolf warrior and defeated him with her bare hands, then moved on to other matters and suggested playing together. The creature felt scared and eventually darted away, stumbling in its haste to flee. And now Luna's attention was fixed on Fildo, asked if he wanted to join. Fildo blushed, admitting he came only because he knew she was unarmed. Lunasis smiled gently at him, seeing how the traveler was worried about her. After thinking for a moment that Fildo was really nice, she changed the subject and asked if he was sure that Fildo did not want to come to swim with her. Or maybe he just does not find her attractive enough. Fildo quietly replied that most likely the girls would be angry with Lunasis. Sveta Mecha admitted that she still felt insecure, but recently Fildo told her that he thought she was beautiful. Because of this, Sveta Mecha asked her to come immediately after bathing, and then the two of them continued their journey to the land of the elves with the information they had. At the end of the field labyrinth, he fell silent for a moment, and then suddenly he was called. Finally, he asked why that person knew so much about the elven land. And also, from the very first meeting, that person behaved very kindly towards him, giving only subtle hints. Tired, Fildo said he could not imagine her as someone who would admire anyone just because they do not put themselves first. Just as he was about to ask something else, a big wolf suddenly appeared before him and extended his hand. It seemed he was about to pounce with his claws, but he instantly drew a sword. Fildo was already about to fight him, but Lunasis ordered him to retreat. This level was her opponent even before the creature managed to touch Lunasis. Fildo understands she has her own reasons, and if she does not want to reveal them, he is fine with that. She apologizes for crossing the line and says in a quiet, soft voice, when the right time comes, she promises to tell everything because she wants Fildo to know the real her. They continue their journey to Misty Labyrinth, where she asks him for his hand and commands him never to let go. They walked silently, but he knew the time for Lunasis to reveal the truth would come as soon as they reached Misty Maze. Lunasis began to act more practically next to Fildo and crept closer when he tried to retreat. The Sword Saint warned him. As soon as he turned aside, he would see no other faces in the foggy labyrinth, and it would be dangerous if he went with furrowed brows. Slightly blushing, Fildo told her that he sensed their distance by her voice. He added, perhaps this was her tactic so she could sneak up on him. Soon, when she was already at the edge of the cliff, Fildo warned. If Lunasis had not held his hand tightly and pulled him back, she would definitely have warned him to be careful in a place where there was no ground. And Fildo would have had no choice but to obey her orders. A little later, when Lunasis shouted that he saw him, the same thing happened. An elf from a land that was only the size of a plate marveled at the landscape that everyone considered a fairy tale country. Suddenly, Fildo jumped into the whirlpool of events that had risen in his heart, and just as the two landed near the entrance, the giver could not resist and exclaimed that he had never seen such a beautiful place. He turned to her, thanked Lunasis for bringing him here, and immediately, without any pause, said she also needed to do something. The Sword Saint ordered him to throw a party together with her friend. Closing her eyes, Lunasis asked if a kiss would be okay, and he objected again, never realizing that two were quietly watching them, hidden behind tall grass. This time Lunasis decided to make the kiss grimace. Approaching Fildo, she asked why he would not give it to her. Fildo leaned back so far that the top of his head was already on the ground when the two finally stepped forward and burst out laughing madly. Two elven children, Danon and Sana, joyfully greeted the Sword Saint as soon as they were asked how they were doing. They took turns asking the Sword Saint how she was, and when she honestly replied that everything was fine, they asked who the man next to her was and if he was her boyfriend. The Sword Saint embarrassedly had to tell them that they did not like such things. Fildo quickly closed the door on any chances for a relationship and explained to them that they were just acquaintances. While he watched three women talking among themselves, Fildo felt that he could not say anything about what he really was like. Luna finally stood up and told him that maybe she had already understood that too. The Holy Sword continued to pull him toward the city, where all Fildo could do was look at its inhabitants as objects of admiration, especially its inhabitants. With his long ears, Giver commented on the appearance of the men and women in the elven land, stating that they were equally beautiful. When Lunasis told him that he was not even sure about his own appearance, Fildo simply glanced at the two other elves and realized how beautiful they were. Just as she was about to say something about Lunasis, she loudly declared that it seemed the level of the moon could rise and caused an admiring reaction in others. When Fildo asked what she meant, Giver replied that it is rare to find a person capable of analyzing, and since now he was at the party with her, his experience had also increased. Lunasis said that she had always felt she would not become stronger than she is now, and he thanked Fildo for that. But Fildo replied that Lunasis was already strong enough, which surprised her. He said he was not finished yet. Fildo's expression was unreadable, and his gaze fixed on the elves coughing nearby. He realized many people were sick. And Fildo asked if this situation was not strange lately. Danon agreed, and Sana said that something like forest magic was happening. He added, because everything is drying up, adults are constantly bustling everywhere. And one of them even said that Illumina fell ill a few days ago. The Sword Saint and Fildo were stunned and asked who exactly. And Lunasis replied that it was her younger sister who has stronger magic. She also added that Illumina is more delicate than anyone, so Lunasis is proud. When asked where Illumina was, Lunasis was surprised, and she had to thank her for bringing her here. She could at least participate in the activities Illumina wanted, and since she was also a stranger, staying alone was not a problem. This time, two elven children guessed whether she really was not Luna's lover, but he quickly dismissed these thoughts. They were disappointed, and Luna could only smile briefly before becoming serious again. They headed to the castle, and as soon as they reached the entrance, the guard was surprised to see the princess had returned. They tried to stop her to check if a person was standing next to her. She replied that it was her beloved, but Fildo corrected her. He said it was only her acquaintance. The Sword Saint added that she was his guest, emphasizing that he would not allow himself to be disrespectful. After that, they immediately went to the Great Hall, piled with documents pasted on the walls. Former marks showed most of them the moon, and by this gave the ruler a sign that he, Lunasis Archelite, had returned. A male elf turned to Lunasis before slapping her. His voice thundered as he angrily interrogated what she was doing and why she had returned. This man was the leader of the elves and a madman, her father, and he continued to scold her. The elf leader said he had transferred all her duties as princess to her younger sister Illumina, and now the younger sister Illumina suffers from the princess's ailment. Lunasis apologized, but the father's anger did not subside, and he demanded to know exactly what her apology meant. The elven princess said they would have no future if they continued to rely on the wisdom of the state, and that they had already crossed the line where they could do everything themselves. She proposed finding a solution within their power to solve the current problems. He even emphasized that he understood this, and His Highness was also aware. In response, the elder, with a condescending tone, asked if she was ready to go that far. She found a solution that the sages could not provide to her father. He finally lowered his voice when he told his daughter that she had to do it. As elves with not very good looks, they asked the old man to explain why. Now he turned back to writing on the board and informed Fildo that they felt a sharp depletion of magical power. The existence of elves is closely connected to the forests, from which they draw their life force. It is believed that when an elf gained strength from the forest, he had a child who would grow up and restore magic on the earth. But recently the number of elves has sharply declined due to threats from foreigners. Because of this, the magic of the forest is beginning to fade and the elves are weakening. Their ability to reproduce is falling. Although their lives are already long, it is becoming increasingly difficult for elves to increase their numbers. Today, humans who have powerful magical abilities have taken on the protection of the forest. They use their abilities to maintain it. Then they chose their princess to take on this role, which was previously held by the first princess and now passed to Illumina. The elven king saw his daughter again and asked why she had left the country. In the silence, the elf did not immediately answer his father. Instead, he turned to Fildo and thanked him for bringing Lunas back. He also said that this would allow Fildo to stay for a few days in honor of his daughter. Then, extending his hand and holding a sharp gaze, he called to Lunasis to come and fulfill the responsibility given to him. Thanking Fildo, he acknowledged. She was still beside her and he tried to use her power. Lunasis felt guilty for causing trouble to the people around her. She wanted to show Fildo the beauty of her country, but when she was about to go to her father, Fildo held her back. Fildo told them that he would save their country by his own strength. He emphasized that his ability was to amplify the experience gained by members of his party. The amplified experience belonged to him, and he could use it as he wished. She clenched her fists, and Fildo explained. The problem in their country was the lack of magical power to maintain the strength of the forest. Thanks to his ability, he would use his power to forcibly raise the level of the elves and thereby restore the life force of the forest. And the king of the elves could only hum about his extraordinary power, but Fildo was not finished yet. He added that the experience was not just amplified, it could be distributed to individual people at his discretion. He understood. The king might not believe it, but the very nature of the gift suggested to the elder that he should at least try to save the country, holding his hand on his chest. Fildo looked intently at the elven king, as if calling on others to allow him to use his abilities to save the country. After the meeting ended, they immediately went there. In the Illumina room, she saw her lying sick in bed. Suddenly, she noticed that Fildo was looking at her from the door. Lunasis went with him, and they talked a little. Fildo asked if he really felt okay there, and Luna assured him. The first thing to ask is whether something was bothering her. She began to tell how some time ago she saw a tall woman who was staring intently at her. After hearing the description, Fildo decided that it was Lunasis's mother. But when Fildo saw that it was a male mother, even he found it hard to believe. Is it really impossible to determine an elf's age just by looking at him? Lunasis said that a very long time had passed since someone from their country had seen humans. She cast a sharp glance and suddenly apologized for any inconvenience she might have caused. She explained that to find a solution beyond the knowledge of the elves, she would have to leave the country and embark on a journey in search of answers. Eventually, she began to feel bored with it. And she also realized her abilities had always somehow interested her herself, so she tried to make a plan to get closer to him through the relationship that already existed. Eventually, Fildo understood why she pretended to have known him before. At the moment when Lunasis asked why she was helping Fildo's country, she honestly admitted that she had no particular reason. Yet he said, if it had to be, he wanted to thank her for bringing him to elf country. Although Fildo says that it would be wrong to lose such a beautiful country, he at the same time understands the importance of family and home and that party members are in trouble, so they must help each other. For him, it was the same to be a traveler. Lunasis could only smile gently and admit that this was exactly why his former teammates took advantage of him so much. They had almost come to an argument when suddenly the king appeared and told Fildo that they needed to talk alone. He gave a signal to the people to quietly join and follow through the long dark corridor. Fildo wanted to find out why the king had brought him here, but without any greeting, he said that the sword Fildo carried was almost at its limit. Surprised, Fildo looked at the weapon and thought about how it was used to kill dragons and werewolves. Suddenly, the king ordered him to stop right in front of a large gate. Raising his hand, the elf king seemed to hold something in the air, and as soon as the wheels moved, the door mechanism suddenly came to life. The king said that there was almost no one left in the country who could take on the treasure. Now this place was empty. The next day, he inquired about the abilities Fildo had mentioned earlier and asked people where he could gain such experience. Fildo explained that to strengthen, one must take people with a sufficient level of experience, and that he had a specific creature in mind. According to Lunasis, there are several larger monsters in the northern field, and he would be able to distribute the experience gained after their destruction. The Elf King understood all this but had to clarify whether it was only him and Lunasis, since the amount of enhancement they would get together was by no means ideal. Because of this, Fildo frowned. The Elf King was right. But he quickly added that their drawback was the lack of party members and that the weapon must switch to the sword shown before them. He approached the weapon, lifted it, and presented it as the Saint Excalibur sword, a hidden relic passed down in their country from generation to generation. He insisted that Fildo take it, and then handed him the sword himself. He also said that he would give him 100 of his weapons, and the traveler, stunned by this prank, told the Elf King that he could not accept such a large gift. But the Elf King only reminded him, in their country there was no one left who could handle this. He continued to grind the granite of research, which had been going on for a long time and still found no way out. This time he fell to his knees, holding the sword with both hands, and admitted to the younger one, something he was still ashamed of. He was still not enough to entrust everything to someone like him. The Elf King begged him to save them, to do it for the future of their country, for it was he who writhed in helpless trembling while saying these words. Finally, Fildo took the sword and accepted the king of this country. The elves offered to replace the new Lunasis armor to come for him. He was awaited by 100 elven soldiers, so said Guaz. The captain of the elves introduced himself as Agit, telling Fildo that their king had informed them about the situation, but with some uncertainty. Fildo explained he was just a stranger, an ordinary man, and did not ask them to believe him, and when he laughed out loud, he would say something else. The captain reminded him that there was no need to be nervous because it was an order. The race, or the way he passed it, made Fildo smile a little wider, thus he made it clear that he was the leader of this pack. They persuaded him to give a short speech before the operation began. Although he hesitated a little, Fildo did as they asked. He told everyone that it might be difficult for them when led by a foreigner, but he had seen so many wonders in the country and heard how his people treated each other with kindness. Although they had known each other for a very short time, Fildo said he truly wanted to protect the fairy country and begged, help save the country. He hoped for strong support from the knights who held him so that the troops would not lose their fighting spirit. He told his people, the future of the country depends on how they perform, and with all their zeal, they set off for the northern plains. While they were searching for exactly where the monsters were hiding, which they had been hunting for days. One day, while traveling, the soldiers called Fildo and asked if they could rest a bit because many soldiers were already at the place. Very tired, Giver immediately went to get the thermos and, while drinking, took a sip. Praising her, the captain said that although she had traveled a lot on foot in the last few days, she showed no sign of breathlessness even compared to many elves who were already gasping from difficulties. This gave hope that if necessary she would not become a burden. Fildo assured them that they would not turn to Lunasis about where they were now, relying on the map they had. By that time it had already dragged on so much that it seemed they were still far from the plains. But the princess declared that they should have already arrived. He grabbed the sword and swung. He wanted to cut. But suddenly he turned to Lunasis and asked if he could cut through the earth. His question surprised him, but he had no idea why he hadn't done it earlier. Because the sword given to him was valuable to the elves, so Fildo could not allow the national treasure to cut through the earth for the first time. Then the princess turned to Agate and asked if he could. Agate quickly shook his head, and Fildo tried to persuade him again. He had already done it. There was no other way, so he finally began cutting the earth, and everyone waited for something to happen any moment. While everything was quiet, Fildo expressed the opinion about how monsters hide underground, and suddenly the earth trembled. Hearing this, Agate called the soldiers to prepare but ordered them to remain calm. The ground crumbled and stretched toward the lower terrain, but Fildo reported that there was no monster there. This entire mountain ridge was actually a premonition of monsters. Fildo was right, the mountain shifted and began to roar. Between us speaking, this is very similar to Godzilla. Once a traveler visited a village on the plain and during the journey burned through all his money. He asked one of the villagers to allow him to spend his money. Night fell into silence in the hut and the traveler began to wake up. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by strange rumbling and vibrations. They lasted until morning. Then frightened villagers ran out of their huts to see what was happening in the village. The huts disappeared, only he and Fildo remained. The monster army roared again, and Fildo, raising his head, looked amazed. Lunasis asked what the meaning was, and the giver explained that the monsters look like dragons without wings. A dinosaur species Rex. Fildo was shocked. He had never seen a monster of such size before. Meanwhile, Fildo asked the captain how the soldiers managed to stay together despite the panic. The captain replied that fighting this monster was a task beyond the strength of a small number of people. Fildo felt foolish for stubbornly thinking only about the next step in the fight with the monster. Fildo told the captain not to spread the troops too thin. Probably the most important thing now was to make the monster focus before it moved, and then give Lunasis the order to continue the attack. The holy sword struck the opponent with a whirlwind of blows. Cutting through the ground, the monster suddenly collapsed on the spot and froze. It roared so loudly that Lunasis had her ears blocked and she could only guess what the creature's problem was. After that, Fildo explained, the monster was too big and slow to feel pain, so it would take time to get around it. The monster suddenly turned its back and the holy sword felt as if it had not done so. Unaware of their presence, Fildo reacted more to loud, rustling sounds. He clearly remembered how the red dragon behaved when he fought it. Without hesitation, he immediately ordered Lunasis and the captain to mobilize the troops and stand behind him. He warned everyone that an attack was imminent when their forces clashed. Approaching Fildo, the creature stopped thinking about the conversation with the Elven King. They said that the sword was a treasure of the Elven land. The Elven King told the traveler, the sword should not be used by those who lack strength. But if this sword ended up in Fildo's hands, perhaps he could unlock its full potential. He ordered him to focus his thoughts on the sword and the sword would do the rest. Eventually, the monster's tail struck, but they could not see if it hit Fildo with full force. Wounds appeared even before he fully believed that Fildo was capable of finishing the fight, yet the battle continued. Finally, he decided to hold back. Fildo began to run, thinking that only a light sword would work on the surface of the skin. And he had to consider various attacks. He jumped high to strike the monster, knocking it to the ground, this time almost burying Fildo in a pile of rubble. Guyver grew increasingly enraged, cutting it piece by piece. It wasn't working. He had to hit the most vulnerable spot with all his strength. Suddenly, the monster threw him Upand just then, when he was already on the verge of falling. The animal ate him to the point that Lunasis turned pale upon seeing Fildo being devoured just like that. And the traveler focused on the sword and, applying a new technique, tore apart the monster's insides, X-Skill Hollowbreaker. Having cut the giant monster in half and reveling in such a victory, he earned applause from the troops. And as soon as he saw how Fildo was rapidly falling to the ground, his gaze immediately changed and it embarrassed him. The traveler could not move by his own strength. Now not even a finger could be moved. Exhaustion and magical power were completely depleted. Falling so rapidly, Fildo felt if he died now, everything would be in vain. But fortunately, the elven princess Lunasis rushed to catch him. Reality made him think. Perhaps living too long meant consequences that had to be considered. His feelings finally froze and faded, and he finally told Luna that all of it was true. Although his wife tried to deny it, he explained that the artifacts created by His Majesty prolong people's lives and that they did this with her. Those who did not give up, even with daughter Illumina, were saved when the gas suddenly appeared. They were interested in where exactly at this moment was the man named Fildo. When the Elven King wanted to discuss whether he could be accepted into the family as a son-in-law for their daughter, who loved Luna very much. A barely restrained, surprised voice sounded while Fildo spoke to the point. The one who was giving was already about to leave elf country when he heard Lunasis calling him. He seemed to have forgotten his cloak. When she reached out to take it, Fildo asked why she also seemed ready to set off on the road. The princess confessed she might go after him to convey her opinion. He wondered how she planned to get out of the fog labyrinth alone. Whispering and solemnly, she bowed her head and said that her country was not yet fully saved. But now, thanks to some miracle, it was recovering thanks to Fildo's help. and there was still much work to be done for the country to rise on its own. Besides, he was a little worried about health. What if Fildo was sick? He had great strength, but he often did dangerous things without thinking ahead. His movements were so sharp that if he hadn't managed to pull himself together, he could have died if he had fallen and collapsed. Lunasis told him that she needed him to live long and be healthy, and this made Fildo ask if the reason was his strength. But the elven princess denied it. It was because she wanted to be with him, even if only for a short time. Saying this, she smiled gently, and she herself felt ashamed for what she had just said. Fildo gave her the green light to do what she wanted, but as soon as he returned, he saw another figure next to Lunasis. They both turned and were surprised to see Illumina. Meanwhile, in a dark alley, the light of glory was pushed into the corner, and rats slowly crawled toward them. Claude Bermuder muttered that they were the strongest guild back then, so why was this happening now? Next, we see younger Claude laying out cards, and suddenly his former guild leader calls him. The younger one immediately approaches. Seeing a child next to the leader, Claude began to ponder. The older man explained he had just taken the boy from an orphanage a few days ago, and now they were working together. The man said that the guild leader entrusted the child to Claude, and he could only complain about having to take care of the child now. Other guild members laughed at Claude when he greeted the fact that he finally had a younger brother, and the latter could only scratch his head in helplessness because there was no other choice. Claude generally only told the child his name. As soon as he heard Fildo's voice, Claude suddenly woke up with a start. Bobson immediately picked him up in his arms while Carl and Dorothy ran alongside. Carl finally realized that Claude had already woken up, and the rest just ordered them not to stop and keep running to avoid being caught. The guild leader in such a miserable state could do nothing, but his hands hurt and his face burned. While he was explaining how he got bitten, Dorothy asked if he had forgotten what had just happened. He continued explaining. They agreed to the mission only because of a low-level request, but giant rats in the underground tunnel almost ate him alive, so he had to retreat due to injuries. When the witch interrogated them, he was told it was her fault because of a quarrel with the client. But the client objected. He said that if the military police hadn't come, Claude would have died there. Dorothy kept complaining that she shouldn't have come. After another adventure quest that Claude arranged for himself, Bobson stopped him and reminded him. The first one was important too. When they reached their quarters, they were interrupted before the fight. They were met with a scene. Other adventurers were getting drunk. She asked where he found those vendors, but he reluctantly avoided unnecessary details. Finally, to the young guild leader, he said, as long as he gets paid, everything else will be fine, and then, before raising a toast to the light of glory and heading to Dorothy, he cast a sidelong glance at them, calling himself a parasite. Realizing that those people would sit there until the money ran out, they eventually returned to their rooms. Carl began to heal the pinch bite of a rat on Claude's hand. Answering Dorothy, he said that all the other guild members were as helpless as drunkards, while Carl kept focusing on the guild leader's injury, and Dorothy meanwhile felt that nothing was working at all. Bobson muttered that despite all this they still gave their all, and the witch could only stare at her hand, fully realizing their powers were exhausted and they had returned to their original abilities. So far, Carl has successfully stopped the bleeding from the claw, but other treatment, which required more effort, had to be done in the hospital for treatment. On the other hand, Dorothy still keeps complaining. Every time she remembers what Chloe always said back then, she gets increasingly irritated. If you are at the beginner level, you can train again. He went on. They had been trying to break through by force all this time and didn't even remember how to fight like adventurers. She added that exterminating the rats should have been an easy task for a novice as soon as she took aim at Bobson. Dorothy began to blame this man not only for fear, but also for the scream. Because of him, the mice noticed them. Dorothy tried to justify herself. She said you can't do it like that now, but before everyone was so strong, that's why it worked so well. She remembered that they had the strongest support and almost unlimited healing spellstones that could heal any injury in an instant. And now everything is different. She needs to prove her point. She pointed to the baseball bat she was holding and said that with her current condition, it is the only weapon she can handle. Bobson asked them what exactly she should be comfortable with, and at that moment Carl remembered. The older man never really had true willpower. Back to reality again, Dorothy reminded. The guild has overdue taxes and salaries to members, which she estimates. The longer they delay, the greater the debt will grow. She told them it wouldn't last long until the country orders them to disband, forcing the dissolution of the union. She was confident that this would sharply reduce non-performing loans, and the party, the light of glory, would finally fade away. Carl then still recognized that oppressive silence when the guild was still afloat. He thought it would last forever, but suddenly everything ended in such a sad finale. Dorothy replied, if Carl had said that when everything was going well for them, others would then. She would have laughed at him. Her wit made others roar with laughter until Claude finally spoke. He emphasized to them that this was not the end yet, and then continued to tell how the light of glory could start from zero. Fildo's group arrived without incident. The elves celebrated the return. As a sign of gratitude, they declared a national holiday. Exhausted but relieved, Phil still thanked the elves, and they escorted him to the palace hot springs. He bathed alone in the calm waters, admiring the luxurious elven architecture and natural beauty. Steam enveloped him. He learned how the elves dried clothes by warming them with geothermal heat near stone surfaces. Ilumina offered him sweet forest water. Fildo finally relaxed, and his body slowly healed in the silence. Phil continued to speak, seeming calm, but suddenly entered the bathroom. He and everyone nearby watching shuddered. Illumina approached Phil quietly and somewhat shyly, offering to wash his back, unsure if she was being intrusive. She explained her gratitude, feeling insecure about her body and wanting to sincerely thank him. Her sister Lunasia noticed the two of them and immediately rushed inside, confused and clearly embarrassed by what had happened. She demanded that Philly wash off those marks himself, and chaotic tension immediately flared in the steam bath. While both sisters argued, Phil remained silent, depressed, as they both wiped him simultaneously. Lunasia smiled while gently washing Fidlo. He thanked her but still hid his flushed, exhausted face. When his back was being washed, Fidlo recalled a loud childhood full of brothers and sisters and shared baths. They plunged into memories of family warmth, and Lunasia caught sincere words and immediately got scared, realizing what she had just hinted at. Before anyone could recover, Phil quietly dozed off and fell asleep. Sitting upright, the girls froze in shock and could not utter a word. Fidlo, now honored as a hero, was asked to wear ceremonial elven robes for the celebration. He hesitated, but the elves enthusiastically insisted. They rushed in a crowd to properly dress him. Fully dressed, Fildo still went out confused but impressed. The grand hall, its elegance. He wandered alone, tense and restrained, noticing how people looked at him with admiration and curiosity. Illumina appeared joyfully, praising her appearance. Her healthy glow confirmed that the recovery was complete. When Illumina expressed gratitude, Fildo looked around inquisitively and realized that Lunacious had suddenly disappeared. The Elven King approached Fildo directly, sincerely thanking him and granting permission to celebrate without any restrictions. And he offered Fildo a reward for saving the forest greater than Fildo expected. The king presented a ceremonial brooch, and it shocked everyone. It signified royal succession, passed down from generation to generation. He proclaimed Fildo the national savior, promising that his deeds would be preserved in the memory of history. The king clenched the brooch and solemnly froze, feeling the weight of change and responsibility ahead. During the ceremony, Fildo was suddenly grabbed and pulled aside by someone without warning and without any explanation. Lunas emerges and pulls Fildo to dance, insisting that the hero could not sit still during the banquet. Fildo asked about her press, and Lunacies admitted that she was nervous since she is the only close partner of the person. Meanwhile, the king noticed the absence of Fildo and asked where Lunacious had gone, and concern clearly grew on his face. The king hinted at formalizing Fildo's role. Lunacious waved it off, calling it a bad joke. So Lunacious clashed with her father and insisted Fildo's power must remain his own without any obligations. The king acknowledged her position but warned, allies need courage, not hesitation or emotional restraint. Lunas was tired of royal politics, so she left and with Fildo felt a distance from her father. There elsewhere, the Order of Knights returns triumphantly, led by a huge, commanding figure of a knight captain commander. Fildo learned that the commander of the knights held an elite rank, and it matched how insanely cool he looked in battle. He surprised everyone by using Analyze, a rare skill that shows the power levels of other people. Those friends greeted him. The ability was not for combat, but it shone with value for future guild recruitment. Everyone eagerly asked their level. Fildo revealed that the knight mentors had 68, which caused shock and envy. Although their levels were low, Fildo promised to share his experience and supported his friends equally. That evening, the group realized Analyze could bring more unexpected effects than they knew. Someone noticed how Filbo's ability to transfer experience makes him incredibly unique and possibly risky. The team noticed their experience grows just by being near Fildo. This seemed uncharacteristic and troubling. One member suggested using Fildo to gather the best guild, while another defended their independence. They agreed to protect Fildo, acknowledging that he was still too young and could be used by others. Shock rippled through the group as soon as they learned that had fallen and suddenly died. When Bobson choked on guilt, he confessed, and at that moment fell while fleeing from attacking demons. Fildo quietly wept. He was ordered to hide his power, or it would cover him until death. And he promised to honor memory by using his gift to build the strongest guild. When emotions settled, someone called Fildo and pulled him back from his instructive thoughts. He looked distracted, but as he approached the distant castle, he assured everyone he was fine. Then laughter suddenly burst out as the younger companion rushed forward with excitement, proclaiming independence and youthful energy on the go. The group arrived at the steep tower fortress, and this marked the beginning of the next stage of their journey. Banished from the upper guild, Fildo accepted solitude and set off to the elven lands together with Lionessus. During the journey, he came across a strange lake where glowing fish circled in a strange pattern beneath the surface. Briefly stopping in a village, Illumina joyfully studied a rare fish that stood on a shelf. Enchanted, Illumina pressed closer and froze in awe at the shimmering scales of the creature and the soft glow of the tank. Lionessus gently warned her the fish was for sale, not for pets. The aluminum was tied with a knot, yet she still gazed mesmerized. In the bustling market, Illumina examined accessories while Fildo quietly immersed himself in memories of recent travels. A local merchant praised his transformation and noted how much Fildo now resembled an experienced traveler. Fildo admitted he changed not in time, but through important experience and personal growth. An interested trader noticed his sword, asked to inspect it closely, and felt there was something rare and powerful in it. The blacksmith confirmed the craftsman's origin likely dwarven, and hinted at hidden enchantments embedded in its fine design. Fildo learned that dwarves are legendary smiths. They cast spells on mighty armor and forged weapons. Lionessus showed a strong connection to the dwarven land, the same inherited from the ties of their royal father. Despite the strict customs of the dwarves, Illuminus assumed that royal requests might open doors for Fildo's visit. Illumina directly asked Fildo if he wanted to enter, and caught him completely off guard. Without hesitation, the group agreed to set off. Their next journey in the dwarven lands was officially launched. Fildo encouraged the sisters to explore the city, while he himself planned to visit the nearby shops. Lionessus insisted on holding the Illuminous hand, partly to protect her, partly out of genuine affection. Illumina quietly confessed that she was nervous around Fildo, and admitted how much his presence unsettled her. Left alone, he wandered the city streets when suddenly a curious little girl approached him. She asked about monsters and adventures. Fildo answered modestly, amused by her bold, honest curiosity. At the Adventurers' Side Guild, the group was warmly welcomed by a cheerful receptionist, whose voice expressed sincere admiration. When the girl revealed her mission, secretly buying flowers for her mother's birthday and fearing punishment, Fildo gently reassured her, promising that her mother would forgive and love the thoughtful gift. He gently joked, shifting some of the blame to ease her anxiety, while the local residents nearby warmly observed their conversation. Fildo joked, touching on the topic of guards. He felt ashamed. He quickly apologized, realizing that the child took him seriously. Crossing the city, Fildo suddenly locked eyes with a familiar, threatening figure, Claude. Fildo loudly called him. They stood on opposite sides while the crowd watched them, feeling that the story was not over yet. Mr. Claude mocked Fildo's new life, recalling past decisions and teasing him because Lionessus was beside him. He revealed the guild had fallen apart and the others had disappeared. That once terrifying unit had completely collapsed. Fildo silently listened as the light of glory faded his former reliable guild. Fildo realized Claude's appearance was no coincidence. Claude did not come to make peace or seek calm. Fildo asked him, but Claude's growing anger showed. There would be no peaceful conversation. Consumed by rage, Claude accused Fildo of his defeat, promised revenge, and without hesitation, rushed forward. Fildo reacted quickly. He snatched Claude's sword mid-swing. His eyes, with a firm gaze, stopped the sudden strike with the power of resolve. With a shout, Fildo pushed Claude back, stopping the attack before it could escalate further. Then Claude coughed and bitterly accused Fildo again, claiming that his actions were deliberate persecution and unforgivable betrayal. Blood-smeared and unstable, Claude admitted he only wanted Fildo to suffer. Nothing else mattered anymore. Suddenly, Fildo heard a voice behind him. A little girl turned around. She was worried about him. Frightened, Fildo turned sharply, and it was already too late to realize that he had stepped right into the path of the approaching danger. Acting instantly, Fildo covered himself with a shield and pushed the blade away just before it could reach him. Claude rushed into the alley without hesitation, though stunned his instinct urged him to follow. Suddenly, a trap triggered under Fildo, the ground gave way, and he was dragged into a swirling pit. Fildo woke up confused, the locals rushed to help, and nearby a little girl was trembling. Despite their warnings, Fildo Rose decided to pursue Claude anyway, even in his wounded state. Blood was running down his face. Fildo realized how severe his wounds had become. It was hard for him to stay conscious. Breathing was shallow, and his hands trembled until the blow overwhelmed him completely. His body convulsed violently. The locals panicked while one man tried to calm him, and the symptoms rapidly worsened. Passers-by called for help, and Fildo collapsed even further, gasping hoarsely and painfully for air as others rushed to find a doctor. Lanicious broke through the crowd while orders were being given to the guards in her direction, and she stretched out her hand, worried. Anxiously, she clung to his side. Fildo's eyes barely opened as Lanicious tried to keep him alert. Leonard recognized the symptoms of poisoning and handed Fildo a pendant, ordering him to press it firmly. The healing power burst out from the pendant like a whirlwind, spreading strength as Leonard activated its saving magic. Leonard stabilized him. With firm determination, he prepared for any danger that might follow this near-fatal incident. He weakly opened his eyes and whispered a sigh of relief, barely aware that life had been saved once again. Claude suddenly broke free from their hands, jumped into the darkness, while someone frantically shouted his name. Those eyes sharply widened in horror, and she froze. Memory fiercely surged from somewhere deep within. He woke up alone in a bright, unfamiliar room, his heart pounding wildly, and he was covered in smoke. A sharp sound tore him from his thoughts. Footsteps rapidly approached nearby on wooden stairs. The stranger greeted him warmly and explained he had changed Fildo's clothes after finding him unconscious. Philo finds it hard to remember the man's face, as confusion clouded his thoughts and memory. Leonardo Leonard, the renowned leader of the Silverblade Guild, finally introduced himself calmly and confidently. Remembering the rival guilds, Leonardo offered water and explained that Fildo was resting in their guild infirmary. Carefully sipping, Phil saw those eyes widen sharply as soon as he said he had been unconscious for 3 days straight. Leonardo explained that the poison's effect had been cleansed, but the cost to Fildo's body still remained significant. Frightened, Fildo inquired about the young girl nearby, fearing that she had been poisoned by the toxin. Leonardo assured him that she was safe, then abruptly changed the subject and asked why Fildo had ended up there unexpectedly. Examining him, the medic described the origin of the poison. It consisted of rare, monster-level poisonous components. The composition of the poison stunned Phil. Most victims would not have survived. Only elite permits allowed the creation of such a deadly mixture. Leonardo showed interest in Fildo's amazing endurance, and he was forced to confess his secret PowerPoint gifter. He could not understand why Claude had rejected a man whose strength had elevated the entire guild's reputation to the next level. His face darkened with confidence. Unlike Claude, Leonardo swore he would never abandon Fildo. When Claude's name came up again, Fildo admitted that during the few months he had been gone, he had heard nothing. Leonardo revealed that Claude is wanted for the murder of 3 leaders who had no connection to the recent poisoning of Fildo. Posters confirmed Claude's escape. His obsession with Fildo and irrational actions made him extremely dangerous. Leonardo predicted that Claude would return soon, so he leaned forward to offer Fildo strategic advice. Without hesitation, Leonardo invited Fildo to join Silverblade, promising protection and a powerful alliance. Upon joining the respected guild, Leonardo reasoned that this would shield Fildo from Claude's likely revenge, field pursuit. Though modest, Leonardo emphasized, Fildo's potential had already elevated the guild beyond what Silverblade could achieve. Faced with a direct question, Fildo froze, overwhelmed by the weight of the decision. Another guild member burst in with a bang and, boldly pressing, began imposing wealth and titles on Fildo, flooding him with chaotic persuasion. Hearing the commotion, several more people rushed down the corridor, distracted and confused by this tense recruitment scene. The doors closed and an armored elf and a muscular man burst in, shocked that Fildo had woken up again. A massive shadow suddenly loomed, filling the room, its outlines unfamiliar and its presence immediately threatening to all. He quickly calmed the situation, gently offering Fildo water while the others awkwardly retreated and silently watched. Several guild members arrived in confusion and only then realized Fildo was fully awake and sitting upright as he should. One girl froze halfway, and suspicion darkened in her gaze as soon as she saw Leonardo looming over the field. Misunderstanding flared, she launched into an attack, shouting accusations, and Leonardo deflected everything with controlled precision. Sparks flew as she drew a crossbow bolt from the bow, her rage ignited by a deep personal misunderstanding. Leonardo calmly deflected the next strike, keeping his distance and urging her to calm down and end the fight peacefully. A nearby person reminded her that weapons are not meant for reckless use indoors during a calm conversation. Seized by others' hands, the swordswoman defended herself, insisting that she only intended to recruit Fildo honorably. Leonardo laughed, exposing her hypocrisy. She claimed that she herself also bullied Fildo while he was weak and unstable. He accused her of manipulation, pointing to her past attempts to pursue Fildo solely for his power. Cornered and helplessly stunned, she tried to respond as his words echoed through the silence of the room. Leonardo guessed that influential guilds had probably noticed Fildo's power and spread rumors about his rare strength. He clarified his interest in strategically recruiting Fildo as a valuable independent ally. Feeling that Leona's was reflecting his own actions, she still could not decide whether her motives were truly different. Fildo clenched the sheet, stunned by the thought that he could have been used from both sides. Lashing out with words, he asked Leonardo to apologize and demanded respect for the one who once truly cared for him. Fildo retreated, defending himself, and rejected Leonardo's claim, insisting that Leonases were not the kind to be baselessly criticized or mocked. Emotions overwhelmed when Fildo demanded respect. He defended Leonosis's struggle and rejected any comparisons to Claude's betrayal. Leonardo's confident gaze wavered slightly and it became visible. He clearly could not ignore her fierce loyalty, as it left a mark he did not expect. Seeking to ease the tension, Leonardo joked to lighten the mood. He threw a curt, insincere half-apology with a self-satisfied smile. Others were furious at his indifference. They demanded sincerity, while Fildo bitterly laughed at the irony. Chaos again overwhelmed Fildo as he shouted back, unable to accept the manipulations and twisted assumptions surrounding him. To protect Leonasis, Fildo proposed that a double victory would force Leonardo to issue an official apology. Leonardo barely smiled and offered counterterms if he won. Then Fildo would join Silverblade without any objections. Despite protests, Fildo agreed to terminate this and declared, all he sought was respect, not gold or promises. Leonardo acknowledged Fildo's determination. The tone softened slightly, but his pride still smoldered beneath the smile. Fueled by pride and rage, Fildo declared war and vowed to defeat Leonardo in an honest duel. After several days of rest, Fildo once again firmly stood his ground, preparing for the trial proposed by his comrade. Leonard smiled confidently. The swords were already ready. His keen gaze revealed silent determination before the upcoming trial. They faced each other face to face on the training field, knowing strength would be tested without any concessions. When the area was cleared and secrecy ensured, no distractions, only focus and skill decided this duel. Inside, the allies watched tensely, urging Fildo not to underestimate Leonard, despite their concerns about fairness. Fildo was ordered to enter the duel with deadly intent. His strength was undeniable. Despite the high level, everyone remained cautious. Leonard, the leader of the Silverblades, was a legendary paladin. Leonard confidently requested the signal. His open level 96 threw the spectators into nervous silence. A bright magical flash lit up the sky, a sign that the duel was underway, stakes at their peak. As long as you live, everything will be fine. When Leonard declared that mercy was out of the question, he lunged forward and struck lightning fast precisely with an explosive first knockout blow. He blocked Fildo's strikes lightning fast, precise, almost flawless, eyes sharp and unyielding in the thick of the heavy clash. Suddenly, finally, Leonard intercepted the blow with stunning speed, forced him to retreat, and he, stunned by his devastating pressure, froze. Sure, they closed in again and exchanged blows, insanely brutal. He acknowledged Fildo's strength without any mockery. A smile formed on Leonard's lips, and now this battle had already surpassed all his initial boundless expectations. Examining the broken blade, he looked amused. Fildo's attack had finally left a mark, and he showed his true skill 120 and confidently mocked the broken sword. It no longer mattered. Leonard admitted that he had held back before, but now accepted. He needed to unleash his full power. Without hesitation, Fildo equipped high-quality weapons and finally approached the fight with full seriousness. Leonard raised a finger, proclaiming a decisive rule. One strike will determine the ultimate winner. With a self-satisfied smile, he declared, "The land one strike and Fildo will win the duel." He acknowledged his own physical advantage but felt Leonard's confidence grew from something much deeper. Leonard's sharp question pierced the tension. He asked if Fildo had really ever taken a life. Confused, Fildo admitted he fought monsters only during escorts, deliberately never killing anyone. One coldly warned him, "Real fights have a price, and this awareness can decide life or death." Without hesitation, he summoned a bloody whirlwind of energy, and with cold precision unleashed his true power. Leonard activated a speed buff, summoned Durandal, and vanished, leaving Phil stunned by his sudden escape. Here, at electric speed, he crashed into Fildo right in motion, and while energy cracked the ground, called him slow. He was thrown back with such force that he realized, in such fights the real challenge was not numbers but mind. Then Leonard swung Durandal with deadly precision. His experience and cold-bloodedness were so strong that even trained instincts failed to react. Pressed against a stone wall, he trembled. He called him lucky when he stood one against one human, instead of. Leonard activated Durandal's power boost, brightly charging, and yet barely managed for Phil to sense the threat. A strong swing from Fildo near the head hit nearby. He managed to block Leonard, only noted his quick reaction. The paladin vanished again. He staggered and recoiled, eyes wide, stunned by another impossible burst of speed. Clenching the sword as tightly as he could, Fildo tried to keep composure. There had to be some trap. His sharp voice cut through the tension. He had already read this, and now those thoughts during the battle dispersed easily and without resistance. Leonard confidently revealed Durandal's ability to enhance strength. In the heat of the fight, Fildo doubted his honesty. And although this revealed his power, he still defeated Fildo, showing that mere knowledge alone could not stop his main advantage. Fildo grappled with the relentless weight of Durandal and could not find a moment to respond with a counterattack. Leonard closed in again. The momentum does not stop, and the blade presses Fildo into an unstable stance. He caught a direct blow as if nothing had happened and, chuckling, casually commented on his clumsy movement during the fight. Anxious eyes watched as the fierce clash unfolded. Illumina and her ally Sans grew weaker with every moment of the struggle. A sudden explosion threw Illumina backward. She screamed as shockwaves wildly tore through the ground. Leonard apologized on the move as he swung, admitting he had gone too far. Fildo barely managed to protect her from the collateral damage. Illumina cast the supportive spell Airwind to move him. She could not believe that Fildo was losing so hopelessly. They quickly analyzed his fighting style. His enhancements inject power explosively, and he surpasses Fildo in sheer strength. Observers realized Leonard's adaptability makes him dangerous, unpredictable like a beast. His actions were hard to read. At the royal court, he was introduced as the guildmaster of the elite Silverblade. After the duel, he received private orders to handle Fildo's fate with complete secrecy. Leonard quietly stood over the wounded man and watched his shallow breaths under the moonlit window. The guild reported a critical condition. The orders were clear: do not transport him to avoid additional injuries. With a light, calm smile, Leonard accepted the challenge. Tomorrow's chaos would begin with him. Though he was bedridden, the man remained vigilant. Trouble followed his name, and this was not the end yet. The assassins argued about the orders nearby. Quietly removing him, maybe it would resolve everything, or maybe it would ignite a bigger war. Rumors about Claude Strike's leadership surfaced and fueled distrust. How could he have expelled someone so devoted? The sudden exile of Fildo shocked everyone. Without any official procedure, it became clear something deeper was going on. The gossip grew, whether she miscalculated or planned something bigger by expelling Fildo so abruptly. A wild theory struck Leonard Midot. He nervously grimaced and refused to explain as the tension thickened. Despite protests, he had planned everything and it had already taken root. Even he regretted thinking of doing something so reckless. Leonard weighed all the options, but if, despite the circumstances, he recruits Fildo, it could completely change the future of the guild. The group discussed for a long and thorough time. Strength alone was not enough for his intention. Your mood and loyalty mattered. His smile became sharp. If Fildo breaks loose and becomes dangerous, they will act without hesitation to neutralize him. Others also shared the fatigue. Threats stronger than themselves became an unpleasant part of survival. Marie trembled and her voice broke. The potential of Fildo was not just strong imagining, it meant feeling something truly terrible. The duel began without mercy. Phil rushed into battle, clashing blades and shocked the opponent with super speed, pressing relentlessly. Everyone watching noticed how her pupils dilated from incredible shock. His strength was far beyond all expectations. A deadly counterattack surged forward swiftly. Phil reacted instinctively, barely avoiding the blade flying at him. Steel met steel, their weapons locked firmly. Neither fighter was going to retreat. Now dodging upward, she struck with all her might. Phil stepped back a step, feeling the power behind each of her blows. From the bushes he emerged beaten, gasping, but still acknowledged her strength. Leonard responded sincerely, clarifying his praise, but Phil, still stunned, could not tell if it was sarcasm or not. Despite the pain, he held firm. The injuries were not critical, and he had not yet used his full strength. He noticed Fildo's perception. The boy's eyes were sharp, tracking movements that most would not even notice. Phil studied Leonard's fighting style. The key was how he switched enhancement modes right in the middle of a strike. As long as he maintained concentration, he believed he could match Leonard's shifting rhythm. Timing was crucial. Phil, though preparing to strike during Hymex's shift in physical enhancement. Noticing an opening, he lunged forward. If he was right, the next hit would land. Phil stopped his strike a few inches short, and Leonard noticed the restraint and assessed him with narrowed eyes. Though he held back, he was called soft, and his opponent began testing without any hesitation. He looked back at the sudden counterattack and remembered the fight was not over yet. Pin. Captured and disarmed, he was interrogated. The gear itself could not carry him through real fights. Leonard recorded the rule: one clean strike means victory, but mercy will not exist here. An unexpected enemy suddenly rushed into an ambush. He and Fildo dashed back, and tension cracked throughout the yard. Phil clenched his sword but could not see clearly, his vision blurred after that previous clash. Despite difficulties, the opponent refused to surrender. He relied on sheer strength to continue the fight. Fildo tried to retreat to rethink the situation, but his legs buckled under the pressure of movement. Leonard unleashed a dazzling strike. When vision blurred, any attempt to counterattack became impossible. He was struck and covered in bruises, but unbroken he tore forward and did not give up, even though the odds ahead were overwhelmingly against him. Considering forbidden techniques, he hesitated. Some skills were too dangerous to unleash in populated areas. He realized Leonard would act immediately without any hesitation, having already decided to fight or to retreat. He felt respect. Phil, at first he still saw value in thought. Joining his guild might not be such a bad idea. Despite admiration, he refused to surrender. His own goals burned stronger than fear and pain. Water exploded around him. Fildo quickly regrouped, and his gaze was fixed on Leonard's stance on the other side of the field. He opens in the middle of the chart, ready for the final gamble, and activates his second X skill. With his sword raised, he released Avalon, covering himself while the sacred energy flooded the battlefield. A memorable surface trapped in routine side jobs which everyone ignored and forgot, longed for something greater than passive survival. Now his decision was clear. The powerless version of himself had to be left behind. Phil, although he shouted about his true desire, saw Leonard smile softly and acknowledged his will as something worthy of respect. Both fighters lunged forward synchronously, and their blades met in a counter-strike, driven by conviction rather than mere brute force. A young girl rushes into the huge guild hall, searching for her brother and finding out where he is. Inside, she learns from a participant that Fildo is not currently in the guild. They tell her that training is taking place outside, then give instructions on how to reach the required building ahead. When she was following the directions alone, she was startled by a strange buzz that sounded nearby and a ball that was bouncing. She enters the room and sees a man under the table, badly wounded. He lies motionless and trembling. The wounded man gasped in agony, his body torn by pain as crystals tore him from within. Somewhere else, exhaustion from Nelton, a sword plunged into the water, breathing heavily after a fierce battle. He doubted the result, not knowing whether his attack hit or not, also pursued by fragmented memories in the middle of the fight. Visibility disappeared, confusion spread, and he feared he had gone too far in a reckless strike. Suddenly Leonard appeared alive and shouted joyfully, hugging Phil, sincerely admiring his incredible strength. Leonard moved forward uncertainly, praising Phil's tactics while simultaneously ignoring the pain from a wound that had barely healed. He revealed his strategy, showing how the depth of the river and the sound concealed his finishing positional advantage. While thinking, they discussed how the terrain affects time and visibility, especially when there is no water to hide movement. And Leonard admitted that thinking he would try to grab the sword during the attack, he expected a trap with laughter. He broke out between them while mocking the audacious plan of Fildo to neutralize him right in the heat of the clash. He sat down. He sat in shame and sincerely apologized, and Leonard recognized the tension between them had disappeared. Leonard calmed him, reflecting on the purpose of their match, and confirmed Fildo's potential as a comrade. Fildo regretted losing control, acknowledging, his strength is meant for support, not to cause pain to those nearby. Seeing Leonard's gesture, Fildo raised his gaze. The apology came immediately, without hesitation and without any condemnation. He admitted his own guilt and understood Fildo's reaction as a manifestation of loyalty to a reliable friend. Fildo fought back tears and ordered himself not to fall apart, focusing on the true importance of Lenosis. Lenosis appeared nearby, immediately making it clear that he had a deeper meaning for Fildo than any simple friendship. Suddenly, another figure landed with a thud, frightening everyone while Leonard was given a potion for healing. He faltered, not daring to explain, because he remembered the moment when his calm mask barely concealed a deeper insecurity. To everyone's shock, Leonard revealed the secret of his sword, Immortal Sword, which nullified the previous wound. When the power of Durandal activated, he instantly cut off the fingers and they immediately turned into a pair, after which they began to regenerate right in the air. Confidently, he showed complete healing, revealing the sword's ability to nullify any injury. He explained that Durandal gave both resurrection and power enhancement, so for combat trials it was ideal. Meanwhile, Lenosis spoke about a recent discovery. A powerful creature was cut and completely split in half. Leonard attached a destructive light pillar to those blades, confirming his involvement in the incident. He confirmed Fildo he recruited with a specific purpose, knowing that their swords have a mysterious connection. A flash from the past showed Leonard's past. He was pressured by others, but he insisted that Fildo's choice must remain free. Lenosis declared neutrality, saying that Fildo's decision in battle was entirely his own business. He chose patience, humorously bought a potion, and earned praise for his unexpectedly good nature. She stepped forward solemnly, introduced herself as a sword saint, and implied that behind her healing vocation lies a deeper purpose. And Lenosis officially apologized for her previous behavior, while Leonard admitted that in battle he used Fildo's strengths. Before he could respond, Lenosis swore to repay her debt, and this caught him off guard with her sudden determination. He called her a benefactor, but others were confused, recalling conflicting stories about their connection. Fildo, with tears, said she fulfilled an old promise and showed deep gratitude disguised as fierce loyalty. He quietly pondered, adventurers rarely get a second chance. If they delay, they risk that silence will become forever. Fildo staggered from his own confidence and realized victories over monsters did not prepare him for truly skilled people. At that moment he admitted, a real fight would cost him his life instantly. Although Leonard doubted his own growth, an unexpected call suddenly interrupted his thoughts right in the middle of his reflections. A terrible enemy stepped forward, forcing Fildo without any hesitation to confront the attacker, teeming with parasites. Lenosis rushed forward, activating a speed buff, and struck the monster before it reached Fildo. He confronted Claude, threatening violence if he did not answer serious questions about his past involvement. She confessed that she had used illegal poison and admitted to the murder of the executive director of Light of Glory. The mention of a sword engraved with Fildo's hinted at something deeper, while others laughed and dismissed its significance. Regarding the accusations, she openly knew she was handing over the sword, although she understood its secret subtext. Leonard realized he had been kept in the dark and was shocked. She had concealed important information about Fildo. She mocked them, recalling his authority as the former guildmaster, and this stirred a reaction from Fildo's ally Lena. Lenosis expressed her disappointment because she once believed that Claude had ambitions to grow beyond arrogance. As soon as she spoke about transferring guardianship, danger emerged behind Leonard and caught everyone by surprise. Claude threw an unexpected strike without hesitation, and Lenosis had to intercept it halfway through the sentence. He revealed his plan regarding the deadly artifact. It will kill everyone, regardless of what they think. Everyone froze when Claude activated the artifact, and before them rose a gigantic structure that gloomily pierced the sky. A giant black spire descended to the ground, and that meant disaster. The worst-case scenario was already becoming reality. A demonic dragon descended from above, and panic swept like a wave. Fildo stood firm, shielding the frightened elven sisters behind him. The beast's call devastated the city. Tornadoes appeared instantly, and that meant destruction had already begun and was gaining momentum. The calculations failed. Fildo's face suddenly froze. He realized this creature far exceeded his project's magical endurance threshold. Two warriors lay fallen. Their pursuit of the truth about Fildo led them to ruin. From the torn earth, Fildo merged together. Energy flared around him. Someone shouted his name through trembling breaths. Across broken stone, the enemy mocked him, revealing himself, Fildo's estranged elder brother who feigned sympathy. The brother interrogated Fildo about the heart, accusing cruelty in cold upbringing. Fildo was silent, his words etched into memory, and the painful admonitions from that crippled creation resurfaced again. He responded not with emotions but with power. A giant call proclaimed death, indifferent to all. Before the divine strike, which was about to hit any moment, another warrior suddenly rushed forward, surprised, but ready to cover the aftermath. Among the collapsed construction debris, beams struck the ground. Ally Fildo dashed forward and barely avoided a deadly hit. Bound and wounded, the rescuer groaned in pain. Blood flowed heavily from the injured arm still. Realizing this, he calmed Fildo. Although he knew Fildo could handle it himself, he intervened without hesitation. Leonard regained consciousness. Though the treatment was slow, he immediately warned them. Bahamut, the summoned beast, was already approaching. Fildo listened gloomily. Bahamut, born for chaos, had broken free from the sealed sanctuary and reached the surface. The skill revealed hidden power levels. The levels were not always accurate. Some monsters disguised themselves as familiar threats, but in reality easily demonstrated incredible power. Shock overwhelmed him when he realized there was something different about this encounter, disturbing, chilling to the bone. Bahamut hovered above, huge and silent, and the status window announced level 200, far beyond known limits. Their pupils gleamed in the darkness. Numerous gazes fixed on their location and tracked every slightest movement. The mouth opened wide, larger than his body. Panic gripped him, but retreat was already too late. Trembling fear washed over him in waves. Muscles went numb, thoughts scattered. This was not an instinctive reaction. It was fear embodied in reality. Voices raced through his head. Survival, allies, hope, but none provided an answer against this all-consuming threat. A sharp slap cut off the panic. Hands and gloves clapped against each other, and he broke free from the chain of fear once again. The tension eased slightly. One prayed. The other watched, unbelieving, as courage slowly awoke in him instead of confusion. The slap landed softly. Relief surged like a wave. Shock subsided. The enemy blinked, puzzled by the sudden silence. Leonard handed him the artifact. When the evacuation was completed, only one task remained: to neutralize the threat. The pendant barely glowed in his palm. An ancient spell promised protection from the corruption of magical influence. The tension fell, muscles relaxed, that paralyzing pressure artificially triggered by the high-level, terrifying Bahamut or Leonard's gaze. Without giving himself time to hesitate, he gave orders and moved alone to meet the inevitable clash. Dust swirled around him in a whirlwind. Leonard's smile returned. He met the gaze of the deadly enemy and prepared to fight for real. The last, a focused beam bursting from Bahamut's maw, cuts through rock and flies forward, crushing everything in its path. Instead of retreating, he snarled fiercely. Energy flared in his eyes, ready for a counterattack. Through the scorched armor, the fabric smoked. The cloak dragged flames behind. Leonard surged forward, stubbornly striving to close the distance immediately. Bahamut spun around, sensing danger. Magical rings activated and launched a hail of intercepting strikes straight down. The moment broke. Leonard slammed to the ground, furious. Bahamut taunted, confident that there would be no more escape. Power surged, his weapon Durandal activated, gaze forward as if nailed down. One move, all parameters to maximum, full output. A dazzling charge burst forward. Bahamut braced too late. The energy blade passed right through the wing. Despite the damage, the scales held firm. He gritted his teeth. The resistance struck but did not break. Momentum shifted. The blade flashed sharply, and frequently Leonard pushed with full force, pressing to break Bahamut's defense completely. The body was battered. Bahamut staggered. Continuous pressure revealed gaps. Victory seemed possible until the light suddenly flared again. The strike landed cleanly, but the armor absorbed most of the damage. His face twisted in an irritated, distrustful outburst. Bahamut immediately met the attack with a counterstrike. The tail whipped up stones, raising an explosion that engulfed the impact site. The smoke dispersed. Leonard with the sword was trapped. Heat and pressure quickly cracked the debris around. Upward reached the open charging wave. Glant bullets took flight in attack. A mistake left him unprotected, and he involuntarily held his breath. Options vanished, a surge of energy burst toward him. Escape became impossible, everything dissolved in light and power. Shards shattered when Fildo rushed forward. The barrier trembled, he intercepted the strike aimed at Leonard. Frustration rose, orders were ignored. Yet that reckless act stirred something unexpected in the veteran. Words burst out like hail. Fildo apologized and insisted he stay. Retreating was no longer possible. Confidence streamed from him and he ignored his wounds. He reassured Leonard he would not break under pressure. Two raised swords, one goal. Together they prepare to strike and topple the strongest enemy of all who is alive. The legendary dragon appears. Fildo joins the armored knight, preparing for a deadly extermination mission. Citizens rush in crowds through the devastated streets. Miguel coordinates the crowd, leading survivors away from the dragon's wrath. Suddenly, a hail of debris flies from above, screams erupt, and panic spreads through the narrow, densely packed alleys. Miguel dashed forward, shielding the child. The wizard quickly casts magic, repelling the enemy's devastating attack. As chaos grows, they find out who the dragon really is. Suspicion falls on Bahamut, their most terrible nightmare. Smoke rises as Miguel looks at the burning ruins. The order is clear: evacuate first, then await results. Among broken stones, the priestess coughs, and her companion lies unconscious nearby, buried under debris. Realizing that the fallen warrior is her sister, the priestess confessor suddenly rushes forward, and panic tightens her chest. Steel clangs, and the knight decisively presses forward. Each strike distracts the dragon from the civilians fleeing behind. Behind, the dragon roars wildly and fiercely. The brave fighter tears into battle from above. The blade is drawn for a deadly strike. Clenching his teeth, Fildo meets the enemy's force with bare strength and perfect blade control. The dragon immediately deflects the blow, wounds close before their eyes, and healing happens faster than they can deliver the next strike. The dragon immediately deflects the blow, wounds close before their eyes, and healing happens faster than they can deliver the next strike. Laughter covers the alarm as soon as they notice the beast is recovering, but there must be a vulnerability from above. Destruction spreads, and finally healing potion is passed there, only hope left. The change of orders is instantly filled with the idea that the key is in strength, so the ally intercepted the target and flew on wings. It only remains to strike at the very foundation. Flames burst from the ruins. Fildo shouts Illumina and rushes forward through the collapsing terrain, holding the blade in his hand. A radiant barrier unfolds, spreading the veil of Lily's flares, covering the allies with divine light from inevitable destruction. Despite the power of the spell, the pressure increases. Lily focuses and weakens, holding the defensive wall from the height above her. Fildo shouts a warning. The blast strike violently tears the ground beneath their feet, shattering it into pieces. The foam settles for a moment. The comrade lunges forward, assuring Fildo of survival, but the danger is still clearly nearby. Over the ruins of the battle, Bahamut hovers. Fildo understands he must reach his position as quickly as possible and take to the air without wasting time. Return. He turns back to the priestess and will beg for wind magic to quickly reach Bahamut's height. Winds rise beneath their feet. As they tear upward to the sky, the aerial battle panic rise was never the plan. Enchantments strengthen her and the knight bursts upward. The dragon waits, coiling all its power behind its wings. Blade strike barely grazed, Bahamut's scales deflect attacks. The only option, a swing from below, straight into the core. The priestess directs energy to the sky. Her body shudders, but her resolve remains unshaken. Suddenly, a terrifying force attacks her in paralyses. Horror flashes in her eyes, magic falters mid-spell under pressure, and above, Fildo and Knight stagger. The dragon's aura releases an overwhelmingly terrifying effect. The knight calls with tension. Their attacks do not get through. Bahamut's defense is too strong. Fear spreads like poison. The priestess's hands twitch uncontrollably. Her will is about to break under invisible weight. Magical spirals break out of control. An explosive wave tears through the battlefield, disrupting focus and breaking battle formations. Smoke spreads from Leonard's armor, falling among the debris. He is barely breathing, wounded and completely defenseless beneath the cliffs. The distance stretches from the entire field. The giant prophetess sobs aloud. Shock and fear grip her trembling heart. Bahamut climbs out of the crater, moving forward. Fildo lies stunned below, his gaze fixed on certain death. Power returns in a moment. Fildo clenches his fist and bursts upward. Debris explodes around. Bahamut lunged forward, jaws wide open, the insides almost falling out. Dodo narrowly dodges, ending up trapped between debris and stone by the dragon's crushing claws. Eyes are fixed on Fildo and Bahamut. The priestess calls his name with a scream, fearing she is about to witness death. From behind, from the armored knight, she rushes forward. Her strike flashes dazzlingly and pierces Bahamut's side with divine power. Wounded, she falls forward. The younger sister bursts into the room, watching as corruption breaks free and swirls around Bahamut. Clusters of dark energy spiral outward. The name Lily breaks from her sister's throat. Something is wrong with someone. Explosions erupt across the shattered land, wildly and mercilessly. The priestess is thrown back defenseless, exposed. Through tears, she shouts. The sister falls while Bahamut grows stronger from the dark energy. Energy without hesitation. Fildo rushes forward, jumping between the dragon and the priestess, shielding her from the incoming explosion, pressing her body firmly against his. He endures the blow, and the light fades behind a curtain of debris. Fildo drove into the ground heavily with blood but holds on, does not speak, only murmurs quietly. In Fildoya's embrace that night, he weakly smiles. Fildoya casts magic to soothe the pain. She apologizes for the defeat. Fildo, ignoring his injury, without wasting time, uses a potion on her. Rising again, he clenches the sword. Despite the fatigue, Fildo finally sees a chance to win. The sky cracked as the enemy went down. Illumina froze, blaming herself for everything. Choked by defeat, she broke and fell. Regret burned so deeply that for her sister it was in vain because... To master Fildo, Fildo rushed forward and grabbed Illumina. Her apology was cut off when he ordered her not to stop and to keep fighting. Their hour had come. The sacrifice of Lunasis revealed a weak spot. The shadows shifted. The monster twitched and staggered, finally vulnerable. Fildo shouted, full of determination. One last push remained together. They would finish this no matter what. This devastating blow cracked the creature's shell and finally revealed the vulnerable spot beneath its chest. Without hesitation, Fildo lunged upward, drawing his blade, closing the distance before the monster could react. Landing with precision, he crouched low and barely survived as smoke concealed the beast's furious rage. The enemy launched a massive attack. Leonard surged forward, calling Fildo on the move and breaking the delay before the strike. Leonard demanded a swift strategy. Urgency burned in his eyes. The battle would not stop. With fury in his voice, Fildo shouted his intention to completely smash the monster's head. Leonard rushed forward without hesitation. His voice was steady. He vowed to support Fildo's final blow right on the spot. Others retreated, relying on Fildo. He leveled his aim, casting aside fear, and focused solely on the target, battered but stubborn. She urged Fildo to unleash everything without reserve, this time without any restraint. The enemy surged upward again, and those eyes narrowed, fixed on him. He would not let this happen a second time. Illumina stepped forward decisively, refusing to succumb to deception again. Her grip tightened and her gaze was fierce and firm, with unwavering determination. The wind swept over her, memories came alive, and the power she had once doubted now blossomed through shared experience. A storm of petals and blades erupted, and Illumina's magic sharply accelerated Fildo's movement toward their enemy in the sky. Her level soared, overwhelmed by unleashed power. Illumina was no longer just support, she had become a force herself. Tears fell, but her fear disappeared. She screamed with confidence and rushed forward, hell magic, freezing resistance. The beast's eyes sharply widened in shock as razor-sharp vines pierced its armored body from all sides. The wind fiercely rushed around them. Fildo broke through the storm, striking quickly until the creature recovered. Leonard burst into the fight, launching an attack from the air while his comrades below kept the monster occupied. His strike missed. The enemy laughed. Blood trickled in thin streams. Leonard clung to resilience. Pain hit instantly. An explosive counterattack flared. Dust and heat covered everything around, obscuring whether anyone survived the blast. Leonard madly charged forward, laughing through the pain. Despite the injury, he forced himself to play a vital bait. Sword raised high, Fildo descended through the storm, ready to end everything with one final strike. Analyzing past attacks, Fildo found a weak spot hidden near the monster's burning throat. He struck hard, shouting with confidence. The enemy's core finally pulsed, exposed and vulnerable. He watched each shot, silence tightened until the roar of debris rolled. Illumina whispered, "It is unknown if Fildo's final strike hit." A crack spread beneath their feet as the armored warrior raised his blade for the final blow. The monster laughed mockingly, unaware that the attack had already exposed a critical vulnerability in its defense. Despite the blood and exhaustion, the team's efforts created a gap, albeit barely noticeable, without Without hesitation, he struck the weak spot again, shouted with all his might, and the fragments exploded outward with a thunderous roar. The heart flinched from the blows. Fildo's face sharpened. He prepared for the final strike. The pressure increased, but the blade could not penetrate deeply enough. The energy dissipated from the blow. Bahamut jerked back. The heads howled in pain. The counterattack gathered, tearing the distance between them once again. Confusion spread. There was still too little magical energy. His ultimate technique was still out of reach. Explanation quickly. The power of Holy Breaker is needed. They did not yet have to guarantee a clean finish. The core of Bahamut remained visible but stable, and now weakening it was the only option left. Rubble scattered as shockwaves bit into the ground. Everyone instinctively ducked, managing only that to survive. Retreat seemed wise, but hesitation vanished. The monster lunged forward with another devastating roar. Energy surged upward. He jumped, drawing his weapon, and poured everything into one last devastating strike. Blade trembled under pressure. Resistance grew. He gritted his teeth and stubbornly held the grip, not intending to let go. Confidence wavered. Despite anger at having to rely on borrowed power, there was no other choice left. Gritting his teeth, he raised his hand. Extreme energy surged upward. This step was always forbidden. Confused glances shot upward. The growing energy flow struck the allies. Everyone around shuddered, both the battlefield ruins and distant cities. Millennia of accumulated experience surged upward, and every last drop flowed into a single warrior's power. Snow. Particle-like swirled around his body. This chaos began just as Bahamut awoke. The sky split above him. The power flow surged forward. Indicators rapidly rose, and the legend started exactly where the ruin had almost put a full stop. Everything was reduced to this final strike. The sword surged forward and hit directly into Bahamut's exposed core. Dust settled in the air, and a huge crater swallowed half the city. Soldiers froze in horror on the walls and looked down. Their thoughts clung tightly to the ruins where their family once lived. Nearby guards clung to resilience, forcing themselves to hold on while an unknown force stealthily approached closer. The strongest warrior of the nation, their last hope for defense. Suddenly, the sky split open. A dark mass struck the fortress, scattered debris, and shook the ground beneath them. Among the debris, the creature writhed in visible pain, and its power flowed through every movement it made. Before anyone could recover, she dashed forward again. Soldiers stumbled backward, hearts pounded wildly, and the roar announced a new wave of destruction. A shadow whirled across the battlefield as a lone rider landed directly on the massive creature, and the impact scattered it as if the battle itself had changed course. From afar, far beyond the walls, the earth trembled. The kingdom gathered and defensively tightened, realizing the true scale of the awakened power. This creature was known as Bahamut, an ancient dragon who once reshaped continents and destroyed states over 1,000 years ago. The fierce battle reached its final stage. Wings tore through the sky, slicing clouds with raw energy. Yet despite all its power, the mighty dragon shuddered, trembling from a single human. The dragon's body shuddered as the blade passed through dark scales. It was not fear of death, it was recognition. Memories from past centuries surfaced, and they recognized the man who once sealed her, holding the same sacred sword, Excalibur. A dazzling light burst from the sky, cutting through clouds and shadow, heralding the awakening of a forgotten power. The dragon tore the air with a roar, wildly thrashing as the earth cracked and split beneath the blows of its waves. Through the dissipating smoke, a solitary figure confidently emerged, calm, unbreakable, and ready to end this battle once more. Fildo sharply fell to the ground, his body aching from the fall. As he tried to move amid the rising dust, all his breath was knocked out of his chest. He lay still and suddenly realized, somehow he had managed to survive. The traces of Haynes stretched across his back, but the relief of being alive evened out his breath. Before he could recover, a giant shadow loomed over him. The dragon rose again, its claws tearing the ground. The earth trembled as Fildo forced himself to stand, and his strength faded with every breath. Glancing upward, he froze beneath the giant jaws of the creature. The fangs were already ready to strike. The ground split open from the brutal strike as lightning tore through the cracks. Fildo's body twitched and the power flowed outward in waves, shaking the battlefield. From the chaos, a figure in shining armor cleaved the dragon with a blow of incredible force. The echo of the clash rolled through the air. The knight advanced without hesitation, and the weapon blazed. His strength matched the fury of the creature, but his calm eyes revealed boundless experience. Looking closely, the knight recognized the same glow, familiar from ancient times. Understanding struck him instantly. Fildo's ability, the power of the dot giver, was unmistakable. The dragon's voice thundered among the ruins, boiling with hatred. The knight gripped his blade tightly, feeling the end of an ancient enmity that had come alive again. The dragon's last words echoed across the battlefield, filled with bitterness. The bloody kinship of the traitor surfaced in him, and he vowed revenge before his figure vanished into the darkness. Silence covered the fall of the monster. Leonard stood frozen, watching the dissolving shadows, uncertain if the danger had truly passed. Nearby, Fildo collapsed to the ground, his body battered, blood dripping from wounds. His companions rushed to him, relief mingled with panic as they saw he was breathing but gravely wounded. After a quick check, the knight assured them that Fildo's life was out of danger, although his endurance was almost incredible. Ignoring everything, Leonard lifted Fildo off the ground and slung him over his shoulder, already feeling bitterly the report this battle would bring. When the tension hung in the air, the elf stepped forward, voice calm but firm. She asked Leonard to entrust Fildo to her, insisting that they must leave the country immediately. To Leonard, Fildo was a hero who deserved honor, not secrecy. Recognition was to be a just reward for the man who killed the dragon. Fame, she warned, could turn into danger, and then she would most likely be called not a savior, but a threat. Leonard's grip on his weapon tightened, defiance flashed in his eyes. The elf's calm smile did not waver as she tested his resolve. Without hesitation, she drew her blade, making it clear. Words had become meaningless, and only strength would decide Fildo's fate. Leonard surprised everyone. He agreed without any hesitation. Grimacing, he handed over Fildo, and the elf momentarily froze at his unexpected compliance. She was grateful and at the same time moved, so she thanked him and promised to convey everything to the king. Nearby, their companion grumbled that as soon as the story about the dragon reached the capital, he would face endless paperwork. While they prepared to depart, Leonard pondered the mysterious gift of Fildo, the power to distribute and multiply experience points. Even the elf acknowledged the truth. Such an ability could reshape nations if left unchecked. This very thought passed through the group with anxiety. Despite his fears, Leonard brushed off the fear with a calm smile. Leonard stood before the fortress, which was settling stone by stone, and his cloak rhythmically swayed in the wind. Quietly and confidently, he said that one day Fildo herself would come for the silver blade. Meanwhile, Fildo's companion gently held him and swore she would not interfere with his decisions. Whatever path he chose, she would respect it. Before Leonard set off, one of Fildo's allies called out from the battlefield and returned a small object she had kept during the skirmish. The knight's gaze softened as soon as he recognized it, a necklace that drives away evil, a powerful talisman against darkness. He refused to take it back, insisting, "It belongs to Fildo." Leonard sighed with a tired smile, already anticipating the questions that would await him at the royal court, when he said, while the team was preparing to depart, in the year 1332, according to the kingdom's calendar, a new record began to unfold. Although the attack caused panic, the damage was limited. The destruction of the dragon never went beyond the training ground, so the city was spared from total ruin. After everything, Leonard and the Silver Blades were honored for their bravery. Their names echoed through the palace corridors as the country celebrated their victory. Yet despite the victory, one mystery remained. The man accused of summoning the Bahamut Claude Glamatics vanished without a trace. Reports from the military confirmed, during the chaos, Bahamut broke through the city walls. Witnesses claimed to have seen a human figure riding on the back of a dragon as it descended upon the capital. Although rumors spread quickly, no one could prove the truth. The event remained shrouded in uncertainty. After the incident with Bahamut, rumors spread throughout the Elven Kingdom. The princess survived and returned safely. Gossip swirled around Fildo's involvement and the possibility that he might be a royal claimant. Whispers filled the palace corridors as a figure calmly approached. The courtiers turned their attention to her. Smiles returned to the court. The princess reconciled with the king, and her restored presence brought relief to the servants. In a quiet room, someone was reading ancient texts while tea was skillfully brought with refined politeness. Fildo sat calmly, reading and sipping tea with a quiet smile. His presence was now welcome. He received a cup of tea brewed from herbs that grew in the roots of the manatee person, known for accelerating physical recovery. He took a sip and felt a faint sweetness. The elf explained how the taste and effect changed depending on the preparation. The open book nearby suddenly caught his attention. Curious, he picked up the book. Its pages were written in Elven script, which was unknown to him. The attendant explained it was an ancient tale once read by his mother. The elf was clearly confused and did not know how to respond to the awkward silence. Quietly reflecting, Fildo became even more attentive. Memories of past travels and elven stories flashed through his mind. Wildesat froze in silence while the elf hesitated and did not dare to ask about his time in the guild. He had never shared those memories. The elf nervously tried to speak but quickly gave up, insisting that her own story was not important. Thoughts whirled in both of them. Fildo was silent while she recalled advice about unspeakable pain and the right time. When Fildo remembered his first saber, the elf recognized it, a guild sword issued to identify new adventurers. She explained that it was deeper. That is, it was a regulatory weapon marked to prevent unwanted reconnaissance by enemy guilds. Lunacious looked puzzled when he learned that Fildo might not have actually been expelled, but they simply expected him to return someday. While Fildo pondered the guild's mistake, Lunas confessed her own goals, and it became clear how Rush's decision shaped their paths. He lowered his gaze and quietly acknowledged her name as tension hung in the room. Deciding to act, Fildo announced his plan to head to Silver Blade, and he was tormented by what else he could have done. Although grateful for the time spent together, he insisted that Lunas's mission was complete and decided she should not follow him further. Lunacious accepted Fildo's choice to end the journey, although she asked one last question. The decision, they were surprised by her calm answer. Fildo was asked if this decision truly came from the heart. She then asked whether his choice was dictated by his own will or by the burden of his power. While he had not yet managed to answer, she pressed forward. Could it be that he simply wanted someone else to bear this burden? Confused, Fildo tried to respond, but Luna clarified. She was not blaming him, he just could not express what she truly felt. Lunis gently reminded Fildo of his previous words. He wanted to live freely, without the shackles of his own power. While she sat beside him, she encouraged him to rely on others if he still doubted his path. Smiling warmly, she reminded him of her own role to be the elder in his adventure. Their moment was interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. Elven attendants respectfully invited Fildo to meet the royal person, and a bit of tension immediately hung in the air. Then misunderstandings quickly escalated into conflict, while those present laughed and Fildo panicked and tried to explain himself. The maidservant suddenly announced excitedly, "The king is calling." Overwhelmed with emotions, Rose gratefully recalled the princess's growth and rushed to perform her duties. At that very moment, Fildo and Lunazis were also affected. Although Lunasu wanted to go with him, the courtiers persuaded her to rest. Quietly agreeing, she left Fildo with a gaze that lingered long after he went to the summons. Led through vast halls, Fildo cautiously proceeded to the king's chambers, keeping in mind, before the monarch one must be composed. As soon as he arrived, he was officially introduced. The door creaked open, and tension grew as he stepped forward. Inside, preparations were already in full swing. Attendants, dressed and focused, returned to greet him and said they had been waiting and were ready to begin. The Elven King asked Fildo to take off his clothes. Confused in his own thoughts and blushing with shame, Fildo hesitated while the greedily minded servants watched him with shining eyes. After carrying out the order, he showed mysterious signs on his shoulder. The king looked at the patterns in surprise. When the marks became clearer, the king began to prepare his own spell. A powerful vision of runes swirled around his hand. He noticed the curse-like effect embedded in Fildo's body. Despite years of experience, he saw this magic for the first time. Although the spread was momentarily stopped, the king admitted the curse requires more time for analysis. He advised Fildo to use protective items if the symptoms worsen. The king enthusiastically revealed a complex magical theory, overwhelming, filled with a stream of dense information. When Fildo changed clothes, the conversation turned to the distribution of mana. Restoring power was easy, but imagining its flow and redirecting it was much harder, even for the king. Fildo recalled the colossal experience he gained from Bahamut and how his ability multiplied these points to absurd values, causing the growth to become uncontrollable. Not finding a safer place to command his forces, he turned to the elves for help, who could advise on the mysterious condition of his hand. But the dark presence stirred, and the voice paused with a question. Did Fildo, having such power, truly want to help others and not use it for revenge? Fildo stood confidently and declared that he had no intention of taking revenge. The voice was calm but unwavering. The Elven King silently listened, half remembering that he was handing such a mighty sword to a human as a sign of deep trust, so he wanted to honor this gesture. With full faith in the elves, Fildo proposed to entrust them with the experience points, relying on their wise use of them. The king, moved by sincerity, shook his hand. When their palms clasped, the room was covered by a piercing flash of light, and this became the beginning of a joint agreement. Frightened by the sudden glow, the servant rushed to explain that it was merely a side effect of the magical amulet. Suspicion flared as soon as Fildo felt something was wrong. He noticed barely noticeable movements and began to wonder why there had been no reaction before. His thoughts raced, and when he recalled the food served earlier that was still untouched, realization struck like an electric shock. He broke out in a sweat from anxiety. In Pozaflang, the warriors discussed how food offerings often reflected royal intentions. If something was recognized as nationally important, even the most sophisticated strategies were employed. Lunasis, embarrassed and breathless, blindly barged through refusals and excuses. She hinted at a sense of responsibility, briefly mentioning the bond that was strengthening between them. Fildo panicked, abruptly retreated, and quickly excused himself. He rushed out of the room, and everyone froze in place while he shouted that he would return very soon. The king sensed something, and it immediately became clear that disaster had occurred, so he gave orders and Fildo suddenly dashed out of the hall. Before he could break free, several elves grabbed him mid-jump and tried to hold him back. While Fildo shouted in confusion, the king calmly announced him as the honorary fiancé, the one who must be accepted with care. There Fildo rushes down the corridor, and behind him a dazzling light flashes and cries echo. His face is tense, he feels imminent danger. Suddenly he slips on the floor, loses balance, his eyes widen as he instinctively catches himself, and in the next moment falls heavily with a thud. When the dust settles, he finds himself on the floor. Around him, a crowd of excited elf girls rushes towards him, hearts shining in their eyes. Panic clamps his shoulder instead of confusion. Many hands reach out to him. He tries to escape, choking on the sudden attention. In the distance, an elf silently watches, calmly sipping from a cup and not worrying about the chaos unfolding nearby. Trapped in exhausting, chaotic frenzy, Fildo chokes in the crowd of reaching hands. Panic distorts his face. He gasps for air. Voices echo around him, whispers about the kingdom, duty, and prophecy, while his body is pulled through the crowd, which is increasingly getting out of control. Without warning, beams of magical power pierce the corridor, dispersing the crowd and instantly ending the chase. Seizing the chance, Fildo escapes along with several others, dashing forward with urgent haste, while chaos rises behind. One mistake throws him off mid-flight. He freezes, stunned, a moment before crashing down again and plunging back into the confusion. Next to the corridor, Fildo sharply turns, fleeing from pursuers. One of them manages to notice him, face distorted with wild excitement. He has landed. Another hall, others search, looking around confusedly, unsure if he passed through. The group breaks apart as doubt spreads among them. Nearby, Fildo climbs a ladder, escaping detection. Another elf prepares to help, cautiously surveying the area. They reach a higher place hidden by buildings. The elf peeks over the edge, and Fildo watches her with a vigilant, tense gaze. Breathing heavily, they pause to recover. Realization comes. He left behind a crucial thing, but it's too late to retreat. The elf, in despair, grabbed Fildo and began scolding him. He justified himself, showing that he received nothing from the king. Trying to downplay the situation, Fildo wiped his face and responded awkwardly. The elf still didn't believe him, kept asking about his past experience. Fildo said that back then his food consisted of soup and bread. The elf listened attentively, surprised at how long he lived like that. He was redeemed by another guild and trained under the leadership of someone named Claude before the guild disbanded. Over time, he joined a new party. His unique ability flared up and led the way so that he took a course toward top guilds. The three stand before the guild recruiter and listen to his speech. He explains that their current guild at an early stage is almost no different from others. Confusion grows in the group. They ask why he approaches them, point out that their flaws can't withstand strength, their condition is already declining, and they were once rejected. Despite doubts, the man insists. He values experience. He believes they still have potential worth exploring. Offering them a place, the recruiter invites them to join his guild. He has already prepared suitable tasks for them. Later, the team enters their first battle together, instantly rushing into combat against the approaching threat. The party rushes into battle. The knight blocks the enemy's attack, and the priest behind prepares to catch everything with magic. The priest calls to Fildo, urging him to stay away from the danger zone. Fildo hesitated but obediently retreated. When the enemy forces crack under pressure, the group feels they are acting differently than usual. The interaction has become more balanced than before. While he rests nearby in safety, Fildo continuously floods with system notifications. The level of everyone rapidly rises thanks to his hidden support skill. Then their leader praises the result. He suggests formalizing the team's role officially through a formal contract. Fildo imagines the hidden land of the elves once said to be connected to the realm of the world tree. The thought fills him with strong excitement. Feeling his power grow, comrades suggest someday embarking on even grander adventures together. Their bonds strengthen. The wise elder raises Fildo in praise, solemnly promises, as soon as he is ready, they will hunt dragons. The guild laughs, spirits are high. Having the permit with him, he prepares for the journey he has long awaited, deciding he wants to see the legends with his own eyes. Reaching level 20, he rushes forward to share the news, driven by motivation and the trust of those who believe in him. Fildo reunites with his comrade who brings news of a new mission to tame a monster, but the request is slightly above their level. Despite slight nervousness, the group quickly regains cheerfulness. With new confidence, they gather together to prepare for the next journey. Before leaving, the leader gives the final orders. When the door locks behind the departing group, he silently hopes they will return alive. Left alone with his thoughts, he realizes, in fact, he only wanted one thing, that none of them would die. Then Fildo looks ahead shocked because something unexpected happens. His eyes widen and the screen around him distorts. His party rapidly raises the level, each of them becomes stronger. He watches silently, uncertain. When his own status appears, it shows he has fallen to level 1. Others flash with misunderstanding and disappointment, thinking he lied about his progress. Despite the failure, the group safely returns home. Their peers greeted them with relief and surprise. One of the teammates, bandaged but smiling, warmly welcomes Fildo. His surprise is eased by her warm reaction, and he calms down. The guildmaster calls Fildo for a private conversation. He scolds him for distributing experience without permission and warns this could disrupt the party's balance. After that, he explains how important it is to properly manage experience exchange and takes responsibility for controlling its distribution going forward. After Fildo is transferred to another group, various reactions emerge. Some warmly welcome him, while others grumble or mock. The guild leader announces residual experience from missions will now go directly to the core team. He insists that it is more effective to raise the level of already proven fighters than to invest in a lone and experienced orphan, who is Fildo. Fildo is exposed and harassed for putting himself above other travelers. This accusation throws him off so much that he immediately falls silent. Outside, the whisper grows louder. Other travelers mock him, feigning envy of his rapid leveling up, although in reality they harshly ridicule his situation. While he rushes through the streets, people continue to judge him. Rumors circulate that he is still stuck at level 1 and unable to grow. His old torments laugh again, certain that he will not break out of this cycle. He avoids confrontations and silently climbs up on his own. Collapsing onto the bed, he looks at the ceiling and wonders if this humiliated life will ever truly change. Fildo fell onto the bed, angry at the insults hurled at him for being an uneducated orphan. Releasing steam, he noticed strange letters on his interface. Puzzled, he leaned closer to read them. A new skill called Recovery appeared. He stared at it, not understanding its purpose, but was fully alert.